Chapter 2470, Striking a Deal. After Crimson Stone Saint finished talking, he was silent again. He did deliberately plot against Jian Wushuang before and intentionally forcing Jian Wushuang to become his disciple. He was very confident in thinking that anyone would submit to fate and agree to be his disciple for the sake of personal safety or benefits. He had definitely underestimated Jian Wushuang's capabilities, as Jian Wushuang was a terrifying huge freak. Is that all? Jian Wushuang stared at the Crimson Stone Saint calmly. What Crimson Stone Saint did was justifiable and all the dots were connected, so he sounded credible. Although Jian Wushuang had never heard of the Crimson Stone Fort, he did read about the 9 realms of Golden Crow before. Crimson Stone Saint, let's make a deal, said Jian Wushuang suddenly. Deal? What deal? Crimson Stone Saint looked over. I won't be your personal disciple, but I can promise you when I'm sufficiently strong and powerful, I'll go to Crimson Stone Fort and help your daughter, Yin Suer. On one condition: you have to give me the Fengtian scroll. Fengtian scroll? Crimson Stone Saint's complexion changed slightly. That was the greatest opportunity and the most precious treasure in Saint's tomb. He planned to pass it on to his personal disciple who will claim his mantle. However, Jian Wushuang, you just said you will help Suer? How will you offer your help? Crimson Stone Saint asked in a deep voice. I'll help as much as possible, of course. If I'm powerful enough, I can help to resolve all the troubles your daughter has encountered, said Jian Wushuang with a smile. Are you serious? How can I trust that you will do as you've said? Crimson Stone Saint asked. Old man, not everyone is as impervious as you to lose face. I'll keep my word, but neither will I take an oath or make an agreement with you. I've made an offer and requested something in return. It's up to you to take it up or not. Jian Wushuang waved his hand insouciantly. Crimson Stone Saint fell silent once again. Crimson Stone Saint finally broke his silence and said, Okay, let's do it. Crimson Stone Saint flipped his hand as soon as he said that. The void surrounding them distorted into weird shapes as it made an opening to allow an ancient and mysterious picture scroll to emerge from within. Crimson Stone Saint directly sent it into Jian Wushuang's hands. Jian Wushuang raised his hand and took it with a smile cracked on his face, feeling very pleased. Smart move, that saved me from spending the time and effort. Crimson Stone Saint's face twitched slightly upon hearing that. Only then did he remember Jian Wushuang had the capabilities to destroy him. Had he refused to accept the condition, Jian Wushuang could have easily killed him, bagged the Fengtian scroll, and taken full control over Saint's tomb. Jian Wushuang would have owned everything within the tomb in that case, including those the saint intended to leave for his personal disciple. Fortunately, Jian Wushuang did not intend to do so. Jian Wushuang, Fengtian scroll's origin is extraordinary. I only managed to get one of the scrolls, said Crimson Stone Saint. Only one of the scrolls? You meant there are many more Fengtian scrolls? Jian Wushuang asked in surprise. The Crimson Stone Saint nodded. Yes. I don't know how many scrolls there are in total, but each scroll is extremely precious. Although the scroll is of little use to an undying saint, it's extremely beneficial to anyone below the undying saint cultivation level. There are rumors stating that if one can obtain more than 3 Fengtian scrolls at a time, then it would be valuable to an undying saint. Unfortunately, I've only managed to get my hands on one of them, and even that alone required exceptional good luck. Understood. Anticipation rose in Jian Wushuang's heart. He spent 10 days meditating upon Fengtian scroll, which proved to be extremely helpful for him. He was certain that Fengtian scroll was of great help to him, and that was just a single scroll. He could not help but wonder what if he could get more scrolls. Jian Wushuang knew fully well that it was not going to be easy getting hold of other Fengtian scrolls. Jian Wushuang, I have one more thing here which I wonder if you are interested, announced Crimson Stone Saint suddenly. What is it? Jian Wushuang immediately looked over. Crimson Stone Saint smiled slightly, and when he flipped his hand, there was a blood-colored token in his palm. This blood-colored token looked very ordinary but gave off an extremely unique aura. A hint of power suspended on its surface at the same time. That power was neither divine power nor some sort of pressure but an esoteric power. This? Jian Wushuang frowned as he studied the extraordinary token. He knew at first glance it was something special. This is the Heaven-Slashing token which I got on a fortuitous occasion, explained Crimson Stone Saint. Heaven-Slashing token originated from the ancient god realm. It came from the most ancient and mysterious force, the Heaven-Slashing Alliance. The Heaven-Slashing Alliance is very unique and might have been the most unique and distinctive alliance in ancient god realm. Surprisingly, the Heaven-Slashing Alliance does not have any entry restrictions on its members and does not care about one's background or identity. Anyone who wishes to be a member can join the alliance even if they already belong to another sect and are holding high-level positions like leaders or senior experts in their sections. Of course, there are extremely high prerequisites to join the alliance. In terms of strength, one must at least be an ultimate god, preferably a peak ultimate god. Besides meeting the requirement of strength and power, one must own a heaven-slashing token and pass the test prior to becoming a member. I heard that the members get a lot of benefits. What are the benefits? Jianwu Shuang asked. Crimson Stone Saint shook his head. I have no idea what they are as I've only heard rumors about them. I heard that the Heaven-Slashing Alliance is extremely influential despite being rather lenient to their members who rarely keep in contact or form close relationships. As long as one can afford to pay the price, the Alliance is able to dispatch 3 Undying Saints or above experts to any remote territory in Ancient God Realm within a very short period of time. Dispatch 3 Undying Saints or above experts to any remote territory in a short time. Are they really that powerful? Jianwu Shuang was surprised. The Crimson Stone Saint answered solemnly, of course. Jianwu Shuang, you ought to know that Heaven-Slashing Alliance exists completely in the dark. No one knows the true identity of any Heaven-Slashing Alliance's members. They are extremely careful and will completely erase all traces of their acts so that no one can find out their identities, which prevents them from being assassinated. Chapter 2471. Engulfed, there are many experts with extraordinary backgrounds and statuses in the Ancient God Realm after all. Their hands are tied due to their respectable identity as they had scruples doing certain matters. Therefore, being a member of Heaven-Slashing Alliance allowed them to fight, loot, or even kill for their own benefit. The best part is that it will not have any impact on their existing statuses. This had led to many powerful Ultimate God or Undying Saints experts eager to join Heaven-Slashing Alliance. Although the Heaven-Slashing Alliance has always been hidden and has never gotten involved in any fights for hegemony, it still has an unmatched influence in Ancient God Realm. They're indeed formidable, said Crimson Stone Saint. Jianwu Shuang clicked his tongue when he slowly took in the information. The alliance was indeed appealing to many experts as it allowed them to unscrupulously kill and loot without exposing their true identities. That alone would have been able to attract many experts. Crimson Stone Saint, since you have the Heaven-Slashing token and are powerful, why didn't you join the Heaven-Slashing Alliance? Jianwu Shuang asked. I've always wanted to join, but unfortunately wasn't capable enough to do so. The Crimson Stone Saint explained. The Heaven-Slashing Alliance only takes in elite and experts from every cultivation realm. I've gotten hold of this Heaven-Slashing token when I was just an ultimate god. However, I had no confidence in passing the Heaven-Slashing Alliance's test. After I became an Undying Saint, I was even less certain about passing their test for Undying Saints. Due to that reason, I never went for the tests in the end. I wonder if you go for it. You are simply incredible in manifesting powers exceeding your cultivation level. After you became a peak ultimate god, I'm sure the Heaven-Slashing Alliance's test is just peanuts for you. Jianwu Shuang pondered for a moment before slightly nodded. Then let me have this. What do you want in return? It's very simple. In the future, I hope you'll find a way to help Sewer break through to the Undying Saint realm when you arrive at Crimson Stone Fort, apart from helping her to resolve her problems? Crimson Stone Saint said solemnly. Breakthrough to the Undying Saint realm? Crimson Stone Saint, aren't you thinking too highly of me? Jianwu Shuang frowned. There was a huge gap between ultimate gods and Undying Saints. A breakthrough to the Undying Saint was like one giant leap. Jianwu Shuang was indeed talented and would be able to achieve the Undying Saint realm in the future, but he doubted his abilities to help others do the same. Besides, even if Jianwu Shuang was able to do it, a mere Heaven-Slashing token would not be sufficient for his efforts. The Crimson Stone Saint smiled. Don't worry. My daughter is not weak. She was only one step away from achieving the Undying Saint realm before I passed away and had a high chance of making a breakthrough. However, she had to shoulder the responsibility to handle Crimson Stone Fort all by herself with my passing. She was under too much pressure and never worked on her breakthrough thereafter. As long as you can resolve the crisis for her and allow her to relax, she should have no problem in making a breakthrough. Furthermore, I'm not asking too much. I just hope you'll try your best to help her break through. Only when she reaches the level of an Undying Saint can I be relieved. Jianwu Shuang nodded slightly. Understood. Okay, I'll promise you. Crimson Stone Saint smiled and tossed the blood-colored token over to Jianwu Shuang. After Jianwu Shuang received it, he placed the blood-colored token in his hand and calmly examined it. Heaven-Slashing token? Heaven-Slashing Alliance? Jianwu Shuang murmured. There was a sudden thought erupting in him. Heaven-slashing alliance was mysterious and powerful. His master Xianyi, the first perfect chaotic creature in the world, was also the inventor of the strongest secret sword technique, heaven-slashing technique. Could there be any connections between them? Perhaps it's just a coincidence. Jian Wushuang shook his head and no longer further probed into the matter. Crimson Stone Saint, the agreement has been made between you and me. I want to stay in this divine power ocean for a while to absorb more divine powers, since I still have a lot of purple amulets at hand. There shouldn't be any problems, right? Jian Wushuang asked. He noticed Crimson Stone Saint had expelled all the other genius disciples from Divine Power Ocean and other corners of Saint's tomb. He was the only one left. Sure, it's just some divine powers. You can absorb as much as possible, but you can't stay for too long. After all, Saint's tomb is only open for at most a year each time. Some time has passed, so you are left with only a few months, said Crimson Stone Saint. A few months? No, I won't take that long. Jian Wushuang smiled before sitting down cross-legged again in the Divine Power Ocean. The Crimson Stone Saint remained standing on the surface of the Divine Power Ocean and watched calmly. He did not mind Jian Wushuang absorbing more divine powers. Although Jian Wushuang was absorbing divine powers much faster than any average cultivator by dozens or even hundreds of times, he was not bothered at all. The Divine Power Ocean which I've created is vast and has magnificent divine powers. How much divine power could Jian Wushuang absorb in a few months' time? That was what Crimson Stone Saint thought. However, at the very next moment, rumbling, the Divine Power Ocean became choppy. A terrifying suction power swept out from Jian Wushuang. The power was much stronger than which Jian Wushuang manifested when he was still at peak chaotic realm. It was at least hundreds or even thousands of times stronger. Earlier, Jian Wushuang stirred up a rapid movement around him when he was absorbing the divine powers in the ocean with all his might. Imagine that suction power had increased by thousands of times. That scene was astonishing. The Divine Power Ocean had pretty much gone crazy. Limitless ancient god realm divine powers came from all corners of the Divine Power Ocean towards Jian Wushuang. It was instantly absorbed and refined by Jian Wushuang. It was mind-blowing to see the huge and endless Divine Power Ocean's sea level began dropping at a visible speed. It seemed like the entire ocean was channeling its power into Jian Wushuang. How is this possible? Crimson Stone Saint's eyes widened and he was completely stunned. If he was not bothered earlier previously, he was about to go crazy now with the event occurring before his eyes. There was nothing he could do about it while Jian Wushuang absorbed divine powers at an incredible speed. Not only was he absorbing the power fast, but was also much faster in refining that power. The huge gush of divine power that continuously went into his body was refined and almost immediately transformed into his own divine powers. This was implausible. My divine power ocean. Crimson Stone Saint had his eyes locked on the declining sea level around him in astonishment, but he could not do anything about it. He did not have the courage to stop Jian Wushuang, so he could only watch the divine power in the Divine Power Ocean disappear. Chapter 2472, Leaving Saint's Tomb. 3 days passed in a flash. As the last wisp of ancient god realm divine power was absorbed by Jian Wushuang, the vast and endless Divine Power Ocean completely dried up. The Divine Power Ocean was gone. There was no ancient god realm divine power left. Crimson Stone Saint was still standing there, but his complexion was extremely ugly. He was heartbroken. In order to create the Divine Power Ocean, he poured in almost all his wealth and also used quite a few tactics. Even though Saint's tomb was opened many times in the past, the divine power remained abundant despite a large number of genius disciples entering the Divine Power Ocean every time to absorb divine powers. However, the Divine Power Ocean had completely dried up solely because of Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang opened his eyes once again and let out a long sigh. Unexpectedly, my divine power absorption and refinement speed have become the scariest skill I have after becoming a real perfect chaotic creature. I only used 3 days to absorb such a vast divine power ocean. Jian Wushuang himself was quite surprised. He knew his speed of absorbing the ancient god realm divine power would greatly increase after his breakthrough, but he had not expected it to be so fast. He made another breakthrough as he refined all the ancient god realm divine power from the Divine Power Ocean and reached the level of a second-class divine demon. In fact, the divine powers he had refined were more than enough for any ordinary cultivator to make a breakthrough all the way into the level of an ultimate god or even an undying saint. However, he was only capable of advancing from third-class divine demon to second-class divine demon. That showed just how much divine power his body was able to contain. I can absorb and refine divine power at such fast speeds. Does this mean as long as there are sufficient divine powers available, I can use them to improve my cultivation level? Jian Wushuang muttered. A breakthrough in cultivation level required the sufficient accumulation of divine powers and also a strong understanding of laws. But for Jian Wushuang, his understanding regarding all aspects of the laws had met all the requirements. As long as he had sufficient divine powers, he could progress his cultivation level without worrying about foundation stability since he had a perfect foundation. Everything was perfectly coordinated with his own divine body. No matter how much divine power he absorbed and refined, it would not affect his foundation at all. Then again, the divine power he needed for a breakthrough was too much. Advancing from third-class divine demon to second-class divine demon required him to absorb the entire divine power ocean. Hence he definitely needed much more divine powers to progress from second-class divine demon to first-class divine demon. It was not easy getting hold of so much divine power. Well, no hurry. It'll go slow and steady. Jian Wushuang smiled before raising his head to look at Crimson Stone Saint who was in front of him. Crimson Stone Saint, my apologies. I've accidentally absorbed your entire divine power ocean. The corners of Crimson Stone Saint's mouth twitched slightly, but he managed to reply through gritted teeth. Well, it's just some ancient god realm divine power. That's nothing to me. Although I only exist in the form of consciousness, I can rebuild a divine power ocean as long as I'm given enough time. Oh. Jian Wushuang raised his brows and was not surprised. I've absorbed the entire divine power ocean and gained a lot of benefits here. The saint's tomb no longer appeals to me. Crimson Stone Saint, send me out of here, said Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang, the various sects experts seem to be waiting for you outside the tomb. If you go out now, those sects will not let you go. Do you need me to help you dismiss them? Said Crimson Stone Saint. He only existed in the form of consciousness and no longer possessed any power. Nonetheless, he had some tricks up his sleeves left in the tomb, and those tricks could affect the glade outside of Saint's tomb. He was not bluffing when he offered to dismiss those various sects experts out there on the glade. However, Jian Wushuang smiled politely and shook his head. There's no need for you to get involved. They're just a group of clowns. I can solve them by myself. Besides, I've just made a breakthrough and my powers have improved greatly, but am uncertain where my current combat power stands. Those various sects experts outside can allow me to test my capabilities. The Crimson Stone Saint raised his brows. If those experts heard you, they might vomit blood in anger. Jian Wushuang smiled sinisterly. Let's just send me out. Crimson Stone Saint did not hesitate and immediately waved his big hand. A spatial passage leading to the outside appeared in front of Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang, remember what you have promised me. Otherwise, Crimson Stone Saint wanted to threaten Jian Wushuang but soon learned that he had no bargaining power. Don't worry, I'll do as I promised. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly before stepping into the spatial passage and quickly disappeared. The spatial passage closed up after Jian Wushuang disappeared. The Crimson Stone Saint was the only one left standing in the tomb. Looking at the place where Jian Wushuang disappeared, Crimson Stone Saint felt incredibly complicated. After a long time he sighed. Sewer, this is the only thing Father can do for you. I hope Jian Wushuang can fulfill his promise. All the best to both of you. Crimson Stone Saint soon returned to the independent space where he was and began his long slumber. On the glade outside Saint's tomb, the various sects experts, including those genius disciples who were sent out by Crimson Stone Saint in advance, were still gathered there. Those experts should have returned to their respective sects with their own genius disciples since their disciples have emerged from Saint's tomb. However, no one left. Many sects experts kept waiting. Those sects experts wore extremely cold expressions with their eyes, giving away terrifying killing intent. They were waiting for someone. That person was Jian Wushuang. Everyone was waiting for Jian Wushuang to come out of Saint's tomb. Second Elder, is there really no room for discussion with the Lord? Zhongyi, Su Tong and several other Narcissus Island disciples gathered around Elder Lingyi. The decision was made by the Lord after discussing with the other elders, and it had been announced to the various sections. Therefore, Jian Wushuang is no longer a disciple of Narcissus Island. After he comes out of the tomb, he no longer has anything to do with us no matter what he encounters. Elder Lingyi looked indifferent. Zhongyi, don't put Elder Lingyi in a difficult situation. The decision has been made and there is no more room for change. Moreover, you saw that even the will of Heaven Wei cannot tolerate Jian Wushuang's existence. How can Narcissus Island accommodate him? Seventh Elder chipped in. Chapter 2473, Tu Qianqing Yi and Su Tong both quieted down. They were trying their very best to fight for Jian Wushuang so that Narcissus Island would defend him. However, things had been decided and they could change nothing on their own. On the other hand, Zhuobing was also begging those experts from Ancient Star Temple, but their leader, a peak divine demon elder, frankly told her, "Zhuobing, we realize Jian Wushuang is your brother, but the troubles he got himself into is too serious that even a top 10 sect in Wuxia wilderness such as Narcissus Island took the initiative to abandon him. What can we do?" Zhuobing ran out of ideas. Right at that moment, ring. An eye-piercing light lit up as a spatial passage formed between heaven and earth. Immediately, all the expert disciples on site looked over at the spatial passage. Coming out. Waves of terrifying killing intentions rose up. When the light faded away, a figure gradually appeared. He was wearing a simple black robe and carrying a long sword on his back. His face was cold as he walked out of the spatial passage slowly. The various sects experts started moving around in the glade and soon had the black-robed young man who just got out of the spatial passage surrounded in the middle. Countless hateful, cold and bloodthirsty eyes locked on Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang. You devil, Heaven's way will not tolerate you. He actually had the guts to come out from Saint's tomb. Shouts filled the air of the glade. A while ago, when Jian Wushuang was making a breakthrough, the immense pressure from his life rating was sweeping everywhere and caused the arrival of the will of Heavenly Way. Although, for whatever reason, the will of Heavenly Way faded, but that scene had still been witnessed by those surrounding experts. All of them knew the reason the will of Heaven's Way appeared was because of Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang, who just stepped out of the spatial passage and saw them. However, he was not the least bit surprised. As expected, all of you are waiting for me? Jian Wushuang murmured, showing not the slightest bit of panic or fear on his face but a little smile instead. Even if he led an army of 10,000 stands before him, he would still be calm and composed. You are Jian Wushuang. A frosty voice suddenly filled the air. The voice sounded cold and proud, making all the experts look over at its origins. They saw a buff man with a crimson-colored battle blade on his back walking step by step towards Jian Wushuang with his arms crossed. His pace was very slow, but every step contained terrifying power. Every step he took would cause a small treble on the ground. There were strong energies rising from his every step. That energy became more prominent and violent as time went on. The energy of infinite brutality and fear suddenly swept toward Jian Wushuang like a tsunami. He's Tu Qianqing. The first-ranked genius of Wuxia wilderness has finally taken matters in his own hands. Does Tu Qianqing really want to personally take action and kill Jian Wushuang? Hey Tu Qianqing. This is a true monster you're dealing with. Each of the various sects experts had identified the buff man. Tu Qianqing enjoyed a huge reputation in Wuxia wilderness. He was widely recognized in Wuxia wilderness as the undisputed first-ranked genius who was ranked first of the 12 minor kings. However, following the incredible display of Jian Wushuang's fearful abilities and talents in Saint's tomb, his reputation as the first-ranked genius was challenged. He stopped walking as the energy pressing against Jian Wushuang had reached its peak. Tu Qianqing finally arrived very close to Jian Wushuang. Qianqing. Han Yun of the Great Compassionate Sect who was standing behind looked over with a frown. Please don't worry, Elder Han Yun. Just leave him to me. Tu Qianqing smiled plainly with resounding confidence in his tone. Han Yun's eyesight froze for a second but did not stop him. Senior brother Qianqing, kill him and avenge junior brother Pang Tao. Long Zishan shouted. Both Han Yun and Long Zishan had absolute confidence in Tu Qianqing. Their confidence was based on those terrifying victory accumulations that Tu Qianqing had obtained. Many years ago, Tu Qianqing killed a peak divine demon with thunderous tactics and solidified his reputation as the first-ranked genius while he was merely a first-class divine demon. A long time had passed since then and Tu Qianqing's abilities had only become more powerful and he finally made a breakthrough to the peak divine demon realm. Not many people knew how strong his abilities were exactly. However, without a doubt, there were no more than a few peak divine demons and even half-step ultimate gods who could surpass him. His abilities were also the absolute strongest among those sects experts present. In the opinion of those many various sects experts, the fact that Tu Qianqing was going to take matters into his own hands meant Jian Wushuang was already a dead man. Even though Jian Wushuang had shown his abilities in Saint's tomb being very powerful and defeated a large number of first-class divine demons by himself, it did not mean that his abilities were enough to withstand Tu Qianqing. Jian Wushuang, I'll give you two choices. Tu Qianqing crossed his arms and stared at Jian Wushuang coldly. One, you can kill yourself. That way you could at least die prettier. As for the second choice, it would be me who does the killing. You would end up dead anyway, and that would be a terrible end. Take your pick. You're giving me two choices and you ask me to kill myself? What confidence. Jian Wushuang laughed out loud. However, he could understand Tu Qianqing had his prior victories as proofs which allowed him such credibilities to speak in that manner. Moreover, Jian Wushuang's perfect chaotic creature breakthrough was true to every sense of the perfect term. He had reached perfection in every aspect and was equally perfect in controlling his divine powers to the extent of not leaking even a single trace of his energy. Just purely based on his own control over divine power energies, he could mask his true realm without relying on any secret technique to the extent that none of those divine demons could see through him. No one else could tell either that he had broken through to divine demon realm and a second-class divine demon to boot. If they knew, perhaps Tu Qianqing would not feel as confident anymore. If you want me to kill myself, it would be impossible. Why don't you just attack, and I would love to see exactly how strong the undisputed first-rank genius of Wuxia Wilderness really is? Jian Wushuang smiled. Well then, I shall fulfill your wish. Tu Qianqing's voice was still cold, but his right hand was already reaching for the crimson-colored battle blade on his back. As he held on to the blade's handle, the battle blade slowly slid out of its sheath with a slight pull. Just as he was unsheathing, bam! Terrifying energy suddenly exploded and filled the entire place. It looked almost like the massive glade had turned into a boundless crimson sea in a split second. Chapter 2474, First-Rank Genius? All those experts on the glade held their breath. All eyes were on Tu Qianqing. Under the huge surge of vicious energy, the battle blade was completely unsheathed from Tu Qianqing's back. Boom! A strong bolt of blade essence rose in an instant. Tu Qianqing's body moved. Whoosh! A flash of crimson light suddenly appeared in the void. That crimson light seemed like a scarlet mist flowing in the air, but in fact, it was a flash of crimson-colored blade light. The blade light destroyed everything in its way as it slashed open space, heaven, and earth. All of those many experts around showed expressions of surprise and fear when they saw that crimson-colored blade light. Is this the capabilities of Wuxia Wilderness top genius? Too strong, he's way too strong. Nobody can withstand this strike of his. Blade Principle at full completion. Tu Qianqing's understanding of the blade principle has reached the level of full completion. His techniques are even scarier. This strike alone is enough to easily destroy any peak divine demon. He's Tu Qianqing in the end. After years of inactivity, the moment he makes a move is shocking, to say the least. Even many peak divine demons from different sects exclaimed in awe when they saw the crimson-colored blade light. That stroke was truly terrifying. It also truly possessed the powers to kill peak divine demons. There were many peak divine demons from different sects, but only a handful of them who could probably withstand that attack. Senior Brother Qianqing, this is Senior Brother Qianqing's true ability. Jian Wushuang is doomed. He's done for sure. Long Zishan started to growl quietly. He was incredibly excited and looked at Tu Qianqing with full admiration. However, Jian Wushuang's facial expression remained the same while he watched the crimson-colored blade light tearing through the air and sweeping towards him. He was not in a hurry to strike back. Instead, he was allowing the blade light to close in on him. He's still not taking action. Is this Jian Wushuang stupid or something? That can't be it. We've seen his battle strength in Saint's Tomb. Even if he wasn't good enough to withstand Tu Qianqing, he could at least endure for a while instead of being unable to strike back at all. What exactly is this kid planning to do? All the sect's experts could not understand Jian Wushuang's actions as it was extremely strange. Did he give up? Tu Qianqing's eyes were like lightning as he pressed on with infinite viciousness against Jian Wushuang. However, Jian Wushuang began to strike right when Tu Qianqing thought his attacks would sweep him and break his body apart. His move was not fast nor furious as he merely extended his hand and casually grabbed at the front. Twang! A noise that sounded like colliding metal tore through the air. The terrifying crimson-colored blade light faded in the blink of an eye. A crimson-colored battle blade appeared in the void. The most incredible part was the hand that had tightly grabbed the tip of the blade's edge. An immense strength came from the hand which locked the crimson-colored battle blade in place just like a clam. What? Tu Qianqing was dumbfounded. Everyone else around did too. Long Zishan, who was shouting in frenzy with fanatical admiration towards Tu Qianqing just a second ago, was also dumbfounded. The entire world seemed to have become quiet for a short moment. Until the owner of the hand, Jian Wushuang, slowly raised his head and smiled at Tu Qianqing. Is this the ability which you're so proud of and relied on to make me kill myself? There was a trace of ridicule in Jian Wushuang's eyes. He stood right where he was with one hand folded at his back and the other hand holding Tu Qiancheng's battle blade tightly. No matter how hard Tu Qiancheng tried, he could not shake the blade off Jian Wushuang's grip. How is that possible? Tu Qiancheng was completely puzzled. Just moments ago, he had sworn in front of everyone that he wanted to make Jian Wushuang kill himself. He ultimately made the strike himself and gave all he had to display his most mesmerizing strike. He had used that very same strike which killed off quite a few peak divine demons. However, Jian Wushuang simply stopped Tu Qiancheng's attack single-handedly, and the crux was he had grabbed onto that battle blade with only his bare hand. But how? Not only Tu Qiancheng but everyone who witnessed it could not believe what they saw. However, Jian Wushuang only pursed his lips and said, "I thought the first-rank genius in Wuxia wilderness was something special, but now that I've met him, he's just SOSO." Jian Wushuang attacked as soon as he finished speaking. His right hand was still holding onto Tu Qiancheng's battle blade, which Tu Qiancheng could not shake off. His body dashed forward while the index finger of his other hand turned into a lightning bolt and shot outward. His finger attack was so swift that nobody could possibly react to it. "Qiancheng, fall back now." Han Yun from the Great Compassion sect shouted sternly as he quickly warned Tu Qiancheng. Tu Qiancheng also realized what was happening and let go of his battle blade before violently shooting his body backward, hoping to avoid the finger attack. Suddenly, however, the finger attack speed suddenly sped up and shot through Tu Qiancheng's skull in a flash. Tu Qiancheng's eyes were wide open with his face still in disbelief, but his life had already ended. Tu Qiancheng's lifeless body fell vertically towards the ground. Qiancheng. Han Yun and the few peak divine demon elders of the Great Compassion sect looked extremely horrified. Senior brother Qiancheng. Long Zishan and Yu Aoqing were also extremely terrified. As for the experts from other sects, their shocked feelings were clearly shown on their faces. Nobody would have ever expected that Tu Qiancheng, the formerly first-rank genius of Wuxia wilderness, who had already broken through to peak divine demon realm, would die from a mere frontal attack by Jian Wushuang, despite taking action and displaying his strongest ability. Jian Wushuang's swift killer move had not given Tu Qiancheng any chance to struggle or escape. "Die, boy." An angry voice filled the void. The few peak divine demon elders from the Great Compassion sect were so furious that their faces turned plum red. Their eyes were bloodshot as they released surging waves of killing intent. Following Han Yun's enraged roar, the Great Compassion sect's 4 peak divine demon elders dashed towards Jian Wushuang at the same time. Just when they were attacking. "Let's go as well. That's right, let's do it together and destroy this dreadful creature. Kill him." On the glade, experts from sects which lost many disciples to Jian Wushuang violently dashed forward. All of the experts attacked Jian Wushuang in unison without any hesitation. Previously, they did not know Jian Wushuang had once again advanced his abilities. They thought that Tu Qiancheng alone could suppress or even kill him, hence they did not attack together. However, Tu Qiancheng was instantly killed, and only now did they realize Jian Wushuang's abilities were obviously beyond their imagination. They had to attack together in order to kill Jian Wushuang. Chapter 2475. The Battle Strength of an Ultimate God. The glade immediately fell into chaos as the fighting began. All those sects experts were mostly first-class divine demons, but there were also many peak divine demons totaling up to a terrifyingly huge number. At that moment, all of them charged forward with only one purpose, to kill Jian Wushuang. "Little brother." Zhuo Bing screamed as loud as she could from among the crowd, wanting to head up, but Ling Dan and Ancient Star Temple experts stopped her with all their might. On the other hand, Elder Ling He and the 7th Elder from Narcissus Island were both silent while Elder Wujian's body was trembling from feeling extremely helpless. Those few Narcissus Island disciples behind them looked at each other and quietly shook their heads. Nobody could help Jian Wushuang. He was on his own. However, Jian Wushuang wore a frosty smile when he looked at the experts from various sects charging at him from every direction. "Is this a siege? Boring." Jian Wushuang shook his head. In Saint's Tomb he had spent most of his time surrounded and besieged by his attackers, causing him to have grown bored of this tactic. He had not expected that as soon as he exited Saint's Tomb, he was once again besieged by those experts on the glade. Is besieging really effective? Jian Wushuang mumbled to himself, but the Blood Mountain sword on his back was already in his hand. Jian Wushuang's figure started moving without any forewarning. Ring. In the void, a figure which looked exactly like Jian Wushuang appeared. That figure was not a space-time shadow, but a hologram instead. Formation of holograms was a requirement in order to achieve the first stage of space-time law after all. Leaving a hologram in the original spot he was standing, Jian Wushuang's figure quickly flashed off before returning once again with his real body overlapping with the hologram. However, his Blood Mountain sword has already been slowly returned to its sheath. Chaos still persisted between heaven and earth as those various sects experts were still pouncing toward Jian Wushuang with strong waves of killing intent. However, their figures could only charge halfway. Stop quickly," shouted a fearful voice, causing all those experts to stop and looked over the void before them. Seeing that caused all of them to open their eyes wide. The 4 great peak divine demons of the Great Compassion sect appeared in that void spot closest to Jian Wushuang at that very moment. They naturally reached Jian Wushuang first as they were the closest to him and also took the very first attack initiative. However, what really shocked everyone was the 4 great peak divine demons, including Han Yun, who was the strongest among them, had their heads severed from their bodies. Their heads severed from their bodies. Their 4 heads were flying across the void, yet to touch the ground. Dead? A peak divine demon said with a stutter. "I think I saw a sword light flashed by just now." "Yes, I saw it too, but it vanished too quickly. I thought I was hallucinating, but then, it's Jian Wushuang. It must be him. He has made a move." Voices of fear rose from everywhere. Those experts who were charging toward Jian Wushuang looked at him once again before looking at those corpses belonging to the Great Compassion sect's peak divine demons. They felt their skulls numbed as fear crept into their minds. The 4 great peak divine demons had attacked at the same time but were already killed before they could even see Jian Wushuang's attacks. It only took one strike to kill off the 4 great peak divine demons. Even Han Yun, who was the strongest among them, did not even have the chance to scream before they were eliminated. What kind of ability was that? An ultimate god, the battle strength of an ultimate god. That's right, it must be an ultimate god. I'm not mistaken. Only an ultimate god could kill the 4 great peak divine demons in one sword stroke. This Jian Wushuang actually has the battle strength of an ultimate god. Oh heavens, did we just try to attack an expert who possesses the battle strength of an ultimate god? All those experts who came to besiege and attack Jian Wushuang went completely nuts. Other than that, there were many among them who had sensed the explosiveness of Jian Wushuang's divine powers. As a perfect chaotic creature, Jian Wushuang was capable of completely suppressing his divine powers. In normal circumstances, nobody could determine what his true abilities were. However, he definitely needed to use his divine powers once he started fighting and would no longer be able to hide it at that time. As such, they could now sense Jian Wushuang's divine powers had reached the stage of second-class divine demon. One must know that when Jian Wushuang was in peak chaotic realm, he could already defeat 50 first-class divine demons. Now that he had broken through 2 realms, shooting from peak chaotic realm directly to second-class divine demon, his ability would have surely surged immensely as well. This fact ascertained to them that Jian Wushuang had truly possessed an ultimate god's battle strength. Retreat. Retreat right now. Back off right away. An ultimate god's battle strength isn't something we can deal with. The various sects experts immediately backed off and gave up on attacking Jian Wushuang without hesitation. They had no choice as the ultimate god and divine demon realms gap was just too big. Nobody could possibly cross over that gap. Even though there were many experts with tens of peak divine demons among them, they would never dare besiege and attack another expert with an ultimate god's battle strength even with double that amount, as it would be equivalent to seeking death. If an ultimate god unleashed his full abilities, killing peak divine demons would be as easy as killing chickens and dogs. Jian Wushuang sneered from seeing those experts retreating. They were just being so gung-ho about killing me, but now they are shamefully running away at full speed. Those experts' faces were boiling red upon hearing Jian Wushuang's insult but could do nothing about it. Jian Wushuang smiled again. Never mind. I'm in a pretty good mood today. I'm too lazy to bring myself to your level. However, if you really want to kill me, I can give you a chance to do that, but you should at least get someone with real abilities. You lot are far from qualified. Jian Wushuang did not care about those experts' reactions around him after speaking. Instead, he sat on the ground in the lotus position and closed his eyes. It was obvious he was just going to sit there and wait for those sects to find some real experts. That was true as well. Jian Wushuang's advancement in Saint's Tomb was way too great, especially after he absorbed the entire divine power ocean and made a breakthrough to the second-class divine demon in one go. His advancement was so huge that he did not know which level he even was in at that point. He needed an opponent, a true expert to fight with. However, the first-class divine demons and peak divine demons that were present could not fulfill his requirements. He had to wait for the arrival of a higher-level expert. Chapter 2476. Fan Jianxian Jian Wushuang sat down waiting with his leg crossed, and the surroundings quieted down once again. Senior brother Qianqing, elder Han Yun, and the other elders. They're all dead? Long Zishan stood on one side, still puzzled over what just happened. Senior brother Zishan, what should we do now? Yu Aoqing next to him looked over. Long Zishan calmed himself down and looked at Jian Wushuang, who was sitting down cross-legged. He said with a grim face, "Wait. I've already informed the sect elders. Very soon, our Great Compassion sect experts will rush over, maybe even be the Supreme Elder. Since Jian Wushuang is staying here to wait for his doom, let's fulfill his wish." Yu Aoqing's eyes were stern, she nodded. However, deep inside Yu Aoqing had doubts. The experts from various sects around them could not kill Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang could clearly leave. However, he did not and chose to stay there instead, waiting for various sects to bring higher-level experts. That probably meant he wanted to fight an ultimate god expert. If the Great Compassion sect only sent the Supreme Elder over, he probably could not touch Jian Wushuang. Hidden in the centermost area of Wuxia wilderness, deep in the prehistoric jungle, was a gigantic sect gate. That sect gate was the gate of the Great Compassion sect. A person walked out slowly from the dark cave. He looked up and gazed at the sky. The sun shone down directly on him and it was pleasantly warm. "It's been a long time since I looked at the sun outside," the person exclaimed, then he disappeared in a flash. In a split second, that person had already appeared on the high platform of the Great Compassion sect. "It's the Supreme Elder. We pay our respect to the Supreme Elder." A few first-class divine demons on the high platform identified him right away and bowed down to him. "Open the spatial passage to Saint's tomb," the man said in a frozen voice. "Aye," the first-class divine demons answered. The spatial passage was opened soon after. The man did not wait another second before he stepped into the passage and disappeared. The divine demons on the high platform started discussing. "Why is Supreme Elder going to Saint's tomb by himself? What exactly happened over there?" "Don't know, but it seems to be something big. A lot of sect's disciples were killed by a person at Saint's tomb, even Great Compassion sect lost some disciples. Who has the gall to kill our people from the Great Compassion sect? Whoever he is, now that Supreme Elder is taking matters into his own hands, this guy is doomed." The people from the Great Compassion sect all had near fanatical admiration and confidence toward their Supreme Elders. On the wide glade outside of Saint's tomb, Jian Wushuang did not wait too long. Ring. A spatial passage appeared in mid-air. Then a figure slowly stepped out of it. The experts on the glade looked at the figure, even Jian Wushuang opened his eyes to look at the newcomer. The person was extremely thin and his face was pale as paper, but at the same time looked extremely young and rather handsome. However, what came into sight was a head full of silver hair. His pupils were deep as if no light could shine through. He carried a green-colored long sword on his back. He only stood there quietly after he stepped out of the spatial passage. There was no energy projecting out of him and his face was as expressionless as an ancient well. However, it was the appearance of a man like this that made all the experts gasp. "Fan Jianxian. It's Fan Jianxian. The indisputable #1 sword cultivator of Wuxia wilderness, the Supreme Elder of the Great Compassion sect. An ultimate god has finally arrived in person. On top of that, it's the extremely terrifying Fan Jianxian." The experts trembled from the inside, admiring him with incredibly respectful eyes. Fan Jianxian was a legend in Wuxia wilderness. He was one who started off weak and gradually worked his way up to become an expert. When he was only a disciple of the Great Compassion sect in his divine demon stage, he was already widely regarded as the #1 genius of the Wuxia wilderness. When it came to natural gifts, he was absolutely on par with Tu Qianqing. He might even be stronger and shone brighter. His reputation resonates in every corner of Wuxia wilderness. As he broke through different realms and finally reached the ultimate god realm, he disappeared from the scene. According to rumors, he went to other domains to explore and seek adventure for a while. Then he soon returned to the Great Compassion sect and became their Supreme Elder, stationing in the sect all year long. Even though he had not done any fighting for years, his ability was not to be doubted. Supreme Elder. Long Zishan and Yu Aoqing came next to Fan Jianxian and bowed to him. Fan Jianxian only gave them a slight glance, then in an instant he locked his eyes on Jian Wushuang. "Did my disciple die in his hands?" Fan Jianxian spoke, his voice was extremely aloof. "Yes. Not only junior brother Pang Tao but also senior brother Qianqing, elder Han Yun, and the other elders." Long Zishan's face was bloodshot, he said urgently, Supreme Elder, you must avenge their deaths and break him into countless pieces. I know what to do, you can all stand back, said Fan Jianxian. Long Zishan shot Jian Wushuang with a cold glance, then stepped back with Yuaoqing. The other experts around got the cue as well and stood far away. They were worried about becoming collateral damage in the upcoming battle. Under the scrutiny of all the experts, Fan Jianxian walked over, step by step, until he was not more than 100 meters from Jian Wushuang. So, you're Jian Wushuang? Fan Jiangxian's voice remained cold. Number 1 sword cultivator of Wuxia Wilderness, Fan Jianxian? Jian Wushuang smiled slightly and stood up slowly. I've heard about you for a long time and I finally have the pleasure. Just recently in Anzhou Commandery somebody recommended you to me. At that time, I gave you a chance to become my personal disciple even without knowing your actual gift and sword principles. What a pity that you declined it. Fan Jianxian stared at Jian Wushuang calmly. Only by hearing that, all the experts from various sects recalled that Jian Wushuang did reject Fan Jianxian. He declined the opportunity to become Fan Jiangxian's personal disciple and went to Narcissus Island to become a regular outer disciple instead. To a lot of people, that was an incredibly foolish move. However, as Jian Wushuang gradually unveiled his true gift, they could finally understand why he made that choice. It was simply because he did not want to be tied up by the sect. If Jian Wushuang did accept the invitation from the Great Compassion sect, then Fan Jianxian and he would have been teacher and disciple instead. Fan Jianxian and Jian Wushuang finally met each other, while the people around began to wear a strange expression on their faces. Chapter 2477. A competition of speed, you should not have declined, said Fan Jianxian coldly. Don't tell me you really think you're qualified to be my teacher, scoffed Jian Wushuang. In Saint's tomb, Crimson Stone Saint wanted to take him as his personal disciple so much that he even offered to give him extremely attractive benefits. But Jian Wushuang was not interested at all. Who did Fan Jianxian think he was? That's also true. However, since you're not my disciple, you'll have to die today. Fan Jianxian still sounded cold. Just as his voice faded, Fan Jiangxian's pale hand had reached for the green sword behind his back. Shwang. As the long sword was unsheathed, a bolt of stunning sword essence shot through the void as though a gigantic dragon had woken up. Fan Jianxian single-handedly swung the green sword and swept sideways. Whoosh. A piercing green sword light furiously sliced towards Jian Wushuang. Air was being split open wherever it swung by and suffocated those surrounding experts with its terrifying power. Jian Wushuang remained at the same spot and watched as the green sword came at him. However, he had no intention of dodging but to fend off with his own sword. It was not until when the green sword light arrived 3 meters before him that Jian Wushuang suddenly took action. His right hand formed a claw grip as a mixture of surging divine powers and sword essences gathering in his palm. In the blink of an eye, his hand had already held onto the incoming sword light and squeezed it really hard. The green sword light, which almost made all those surrounding experts suffocate, had exploded under Jian Wushuang's squeeze. Countless green sword lights were dispersed in every direction. An attack at this level is quite insufficient to kill me. Wu Jinshuang continued to stand there with a smile. However, those divine demons around were already stunned beyond words. They were already incredibly shocked when Jian Wushuang grabbed Tu Qiancheng's sword light. However, the person who just issued that attack was a legitimate ultimate god expert. Even though the ultimate god had not unleashed his full power, that casually released sword light, which was already incredibly powerful, was neutralized by a bare-handed Jian Wushuang and squeezed till it exploded. That ability? As expected, you're already equipped with an ultimate god's battle strength. Moreover, your body is also extraordinarily strong. Fan Jiangxian's face was cold and expressionless, even though Jian Wushuang had squeezed his sword light. After all, that sword strike was only casually issued just to test out Jian Wushuang's true abilities. The test results were clear. Regardless whether your battle strength is merely comparable to Ultimate God. Even if you really are an Ultimate God expert, you are still going to die because you killed my personal disciple. Fan Jiangxian's eyes shot out a cold light. With a huge noise, his sword essence shot up into the sky. Fan Jiangxian's figure was moving mysteriously under the infinite sword essences. Similar to teleportation, Fan Jiangxian's figure appeared in front of Jian Wushuang as he thrust out his green-colored long sword. The strike silently instantly stabbed through Jian Wushuang's body and exited from the other side. So fast. Those many experts around were shocked by watching the battle. Did Jian Wushuang die? No, that can't be. Those divine demons' faces changed. Fan Jiangxian's pupils slightly shrunk as well because the Jian Wushuang that he stabbed had gradually disappeared. Space-time shadow? No, a space-time shadow wouldn't be able to escape my soul power's scrutiny. That was not a shadow, it's a space-time apparition. A piercing light flashed in Fan Jiangxian's eyes. Space-time apparitions were something that could only be formed by possessing an extremely high understanding of the space-time law and reaching the first stage. What Jian Wushuang just formed was a space-time apparition, something completely different from the space-time shadow he had formed a while ago. This kid has reached such a high level of understanding towards space-time law? Fan Jianxian also felt incredibly shocked. The difficulty of understanding laws only got harder with each increasing stage. In normal circumstances, the first stage of law understanding was something very difficult to achieve, even for a regular ultimate god. For example, Fan Jianxian was still a far cry from reaching the first stage of law understanding. However, Jian Wushuang had obviously achieved the first stage of space-time law since he could so easily form an apparition. He might even be quite skillful in that stage. Jian Wushuang was on a higher level than him when it came to the understanding of laws. Ring. A soft ring sliced through the air. The ring was very soft and might even be unnoticeable to first-class and peak divine demons. However, Fan Jianxian had super sharp senses. As the ringing started, he did a backhand with his sword, leaving a strange slash trace in the void before suddenly retracting the tip of his sword from the void. Previously, there was nothing in that part of the void, but when the sword tip retracted, a cold crimson-colored long sword appeared, and along with it was Jian Wushuang's figure. Clack. Jian Wushuang's figure vanished once again. Oh, competing in speed? Do you think I would be worried? Fan Jiangxian's eyes projected a coldness as his figure shook and vanished. In the middle of the battlefield, both Jian Wushuang and Fan Jianxian exploded with great speeds. Two ghastly figures flashing repeatedly in the void. Every time the surrounding speculators saw their figures flashed, they had already appeared in another part of the void. They would appear 1,000 meters above in one moment and on the ground by the next while causing explosions with every clash. Those two figures mysteriously intertwined. Nobody could catch where the figures would appear next as they could only see violent flashes of sword lights sweeping willfully. On the glade, those sex experts and their disciples were stunned to the core. Goodness! This is what true speed looks like. We divine demons are very fast as well, but it's incomparable to this. Be grateful. Be grateful that we didn't continue attacking Jian Wushuang, or else he would have slaughtered all of us as easy as lifting a finger just by relying on his terrifying speed. Ultimate God. This is an ultimate God. Countless experts exclaimed in awe. Those disciples from various sects all showed fanatical and excited expressions. It was the first time for most of them to witness a battle on the ultimate God level. The most unbelievable part was that one of those ultimate gods was a disciple just like them, visiting Saint's tomb to look for opportunities. However, this person had gained the ability to challenge an ultimate god in the blink of an eye. Just from the situation alone, both of them were more or less equal in the fight. At least, Jian Wushuang and Fan Jianxian were on similar levels judging from their speed. Chapter 2478. Sword World, Junior Brother Wushuang could actually evenly fight with Fan Jianxian? That isn't just anyone, that's Fan Jianxian. Zhong Yi, Su Tong, and the rest of Narcissus Island disciples could only widen their eyes in shock. Of the three Narcissus Island elders, Elder Wujian's face turned blue while Elder Lingyi and the seventh elder faces were filled with shock. In the battlefield center, the two were frantically flashing with each of them wanting to suppress the other with their speed. Fan Jianxian, your moving technique is pretty good. Jian Wushuang slightly smiled. Humph, don't dream of surpassing me just because you have a higher understanding in space-time law, scoffed Fan Jianxian. He might be below Jian Wushuang when it comes to the understanding of laws. However, he possessed a set of secret techniques on movement skills. With those secret techniques, he could unleash his ultimate speed, which was definitely comparable to Jian Wushuang's speed. As their speeds were about the same, they could only compete on sword principles. Ring. Jian Wushuang held his sword with one hand and swung it at will, chopping, stabbing and sweeping, fully displaying his understanding of sword principles. As for Fan Jianxian, he was called Sword Immortal One and was also the #1 sword cultivator of the Wuxia wilderness, hence his accomplishments were evidently extremely high. He was shrouded by heaven-shaking sword essences, appearing like the dictator of sword principles while displaying his swift and incomparably overpowering sword techniques. Non-stop attacks. Fan Jiangxian's sword technique had a different yet similar style to Purple Blood Saints, which leaned more on the one extremities. He attacked in a frenzy with his sword technique, maniacally oppressive and not leaving any breathing space for Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang was able to face those attacks quite calmly in the beginning. However, after a short while he began to be on the losing side and making passive defenses. I'm not as skilled as he is with sword principles. A head-to-head battle puts me at a disadvantage, Jian Wushuang told himself. It was understandable, as Jian Wushuang may have lived a rather long life in his previous lifetime, but he did not spend much time on sword principles. Even though he was advancing at an incredible speed, his current lifetime span was too short and he was also too young. It was only through various opportunities obtained in Saint's Tomb that allowed him to reach complete sword principle realm. However, Fan Jianxian had made a name for himself for a long time. His understanding of the sword had reached complete sword principle realm and was already at an extremely high level a long time ago. Fan Jianxian was also very skillful when it came to close-quarter combat. Hence, it was only normal for Jian Wushuang to be at a disadvantage purely from a sword technique standpoint. However, right at that moment, ring. Jian Wushuang's figure blurred and suddenly 3 Jian Wushuangs appeared. Apparitions. It was still a space-time apparition. The only difference was that Jian Wushuang could form a total of 2 apparitions. Together with his true self, it looked like there were 3 Jian Wushuangs. 2 great apparitions? Fan Jiangxian's face immediately changed. Forming a spacetime apparition was the first sign of one reaching the first stage of spacetime law understanding. In Saint's Tomb, Jian Wushuang's understanding of spacetime law was already infinitely close to the first stage of apparition forming before studying the Fengtian scroll. The Fengtian scroll was an immense help to him. By borrowing the secrets which Fengtian scroll had revealed to him, he gained huge advancement after 10 days despite studying sword techniques, spacetime law, and transmigration at the same time. With regards to spacetime law, he was not only able to step into the first stage and form his first apparition, but he was also able to form the second one as well. It showed that he had gained an extraordinary understanding regarding the first stage of spacetime law. Every time he gained one more spacetime apparitions, it greatly increased his speed. As such, when Jian Wushuang formed 2 apparitions at the same time, his speed had suddenly increased a great deal. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Jian Wushuang's figure flashes continuously while his Blood Mountain sword had shifted from defense to offense and repeatedly attacked Fan Jianxian. Damn, his speed is a lot faster than before. Fan Jiangxian's face turned gloomy. He had initially successfully suppressed Jian Wushuang with his sword technique, and that was also based on the fact that they were on a similar level of speed. However, Jian Wushuang was currently moving around Fan Jianxian and completely avoiding head-to-head combat since the great increase in his speed. He was looking for the right opportunities to attack at this moment. It mattered not how skillful Fan Jianxian was with his sword when he could not even touch Jian Wushuang at this point. Scram. Fan Jianxian growled quietly as a flourishing white light was suddenly released from his body. The extremely blinding white light had lit up heaven and earth. In fact, it was a frosty cold sword light that frenzy projected its attack in every direction. Jian Wushuang's figure was forced back by the sword light and the 2 of them once again widened their distances from each other. Jian Wushuang, I truly have underestimated you. Fan Jianxian stared at Jian Wushuang with a heavy expression on his face. Even though he held back a little, a simple clashing of swords showed him that Jian Wushuang's true abilities were not to be taken lightly. You have a very high understanding of sword principles, but based on the understanding of laws, you're below me. Show me your strongest ability. Otherwise, your reputation as the #1 sword cultivator of Wuxia wilderness would have to be given to me. Jian Wushuang smiled. As you wish. Fan Jianxian did not waste any more words as a strong light grew in his eyes. Ring ring, shapeless sword essences swept out from Fan Jiangxian's body. However, what surprised everyone was that sweeping sword essence had then turned solid. The wall of sword essence swept into every direction like a gigantic domain, almost shrouded the entire battle in an instant. The dreamlike sword essence was like an ocean filling every corner. Fan Jianxian stood in the epicenter of the sword essence ocean like a dictator of sword principles. This is Sword World? Jian Wushuang felt the ocean of infinity sword essences around him and his pupils suddenly shrunk. Sword World, the first stage of sword principles understanding. The realm of swords. This stage required forming a sword world within one's own body. Once the sword world was completed, it would be one with heaven and earth. During future battles, one could then bring out the sword world from inside their body and suppress their opponent. The sword essence ocean that swept out of Fan Jianxian was clearly a sword world. Fan Jianxian, he had already formed his own sword world? Jian Wushuang also felt rather stunned. He had studied Purple Blood Saint's understanding of sword principles in detail and knew how difficult it was to build his own sword world. According to the Purple Blood Saint's words, Sword World was extremely difficult to develop even among ultimate gods. There were only a few people who could barely develop their own sword world. All of them had very strong capabilities and were extremely talented in sword principles. However, Jian Wushuang had not expected Fan Jianxian to have that kind of capability. Chapter 2479, Shell Boom in the Sword World. Fan Jianxian was its dictator. The infinite sword essences that filled up the surroundings suddenly pressed towards Jian Wushuang in a frenzy when he directed with his finger. The kind of pressure was different from those of regular domain secret techniques. Regular domain tactics only suppressed the opponent's abilities by limiting his speed and etc. However, Sword World's pressure was a kind of oppression. The type of oppression imposed directly on the opponent's body and mind with a huge deterrence effect. With the Sword World's oppression, Jian Wushuang felt an uncontrollable fear deep in his heart. That fear had caused him to have great trouble gathering divine power, sword essences, and using various tactics. Due to that reason, his abilities had decreased in an instant, especially on his sword techniques. If a sword cultivator was oppressed by the Sword World, the effects on him would be strengthened. However, at the same time he was being oppressed by the Sword World, a thought came to Jian Wushuang. This feeling doesn't feel right. The Sword World. Jian Wushuang began to scrutinize and investigate the Sword World. Die, kid. Fan Jianxian did not leave any leeway for Jian Wushuang's investigation. As soon as the Sword World started oppressing Jian Wushuang, he appeared right away. The infinite ocean of sword essence suddenly retreated to the side following the sound of great waves, while Fan Jianxian, who was standing in between them, completely turned into a sharp blade that could pierce through the heavens. He ignored all obstructions and pierced through the void. End by Emperor. Whoosh. An overbearing sword essence swept up. It felt so natural for Fan Jianxian when he issued that strike, since he was the dictator of that sword world after all. A terrifying sword shadow appeared out of thin air, as it seemed it was going to cut open space. Every object that it passed through was dissolved. All the cultivators surrounding the battlefield were completely captivated by that incomparably domineering and overbearing sword shadow. Their eyes grew wide from shock. Watching the domineering sword shadow cutting towards him, Jian Wushuang squinted before releasing a surging of explosive divine powers from his body. While forcing himself to endure the Sword World's oppression, Jian Wushuang raised his Blood Mountain sword once again and swung it. His sword's plain swing did not cause any effects to the void in front of him. Everything was incredibly calm. However, it was in such calmness that a traceless sword shadow suddenly slashed open the void. Ring. A huge sword light appeared. It looked as though the sword light had connected both heaven and earth. It was extremely bright and blinding to the eyes. When it appeared, it had become the focal point of heaven and earth. It even became eternal. The various sects experts who were scattered around the battlefield could not help but be mesmerized by the sword light. The strike was so beautiful. Throughout the oceans and wilderness, heaven and earth aligned. The incomparably domineering sword shadow made contact with the sword light and became the eternal heaven and earth. Boom. With a huge rumble, the terrifying impact of residual energies began to spread maniacally. Heaven and earth were shaking along with the sword essence ocean that filled every corner. It seemed like all of them could not withstand the incredible collision. The sword essences which were surrounding both of them also began to falter. After the collision, whoosh, a figure embarrassingly dashed outwards. The dash sent him to the sword essence ocean's edge before he would barely stop his momentum. That figure was none other than Jian Wushuang. Under the Sword World's great oppression, he was at an obvious disadvantage during the clash. Even so, Jian Wushuang did not show any signs of disappointment. On the contrary, he wore a happy smile. I see, Fan Jianxian. I've overestimated you. Jian Wushuang's laughter was resonating between heaven and earth. I was shocked, as I thought the sword world you unleashed was a complete one. However, it seems that the sword world you formed was only a shell of the actual thing. Although it contains a few oppressive functions, it's still a far cry from the real sword world. I had felt it was impossible you possessed that kind of sword principle understanding, and you have proven so now. You simply haven't reached the level of Sword World. In fact, you're still pretty far from it. My guess is, you have personally experienced other sword experts displaying their sword worlds to oppress you, hence you learned to build a shell of it all by yourself. Fan Jianxian's face turned stern and said coldly, even if it's just a shell, it's still enough to oppress you. Is that so? Jian Wushuang smirked. Ring ring. An extremely strong sword essence suddenly rose from Jian Wushuang's body. The sword essence began sweeping violently in every direction, pushing away the infinite sword essence ocean around it. As it got pushed away, the suppression effect on him had decreased quite a bit despite Jian Wushuang still somewhat being oppressed by it. "I'm not going to waste time on you any further, let's decide who's the victor now," said Jian Wushuang coldly. "Come at me then." "What? Do you think I'm afraid of you?" Fan Jianxian showed no fear. He was a well-respected ultimate god with extremely overpowered abilities and had absolute confidence in his sword world. Boom. Fan Jianxian suddenly took a big leap. As he leaped out, the infinite sword essences focused at a single point. Fan Jiangxian's eyes were projecting a thick light of essence. The green-colored long sword in his grip had lashed out. Boom boom boom, heaven and earth turned dark as the void around them trembled and rose up. A gigantic green-colored sword shadow began enlarging in front of everyone's eyes, covering both sky and sun. In the end, it shrouded half of the void. Infinite god powers and sword essences gathered within the green-colored sword shadow. As the green-colored sword shadow appeared, all those sex experts looked desperate. "That's way too strong." That energy was unbelievably strong. With energies as such, this might be Fan Jiangxian's strongest strike. Many were exclaiming in awe. Yes, the strongest strike. Fan Jianxian had unleashed his maximum abilities as the #1 sword cultivator of Wuxia wilderness. As the overbearing green sword shadow was forming, Jian Wushuang only smiled faintly. His right hand which gripped on Blood Mountain sword tightened up slightly. Surging divine powers were swiftly charging into the sword. At that moment, Jian Wushuang also raised his divine power to his limits. He had become a perfect chaotic creature when he advanced from the chaotic realm to second-class divine demon, during which his divine powers were refined from his transcendence and morphing. In addition, the divine powers in his primordial void celestial body had also been increased. When he completely unleashed his divine power, Jian Wushuang would not be weaker than a regular ultimate god. In fact, he even felt that his divine power could be slightly stronger than regular ultimate gods. Due to that fact, he had held back his divine power and only unleashed 70% of it when clashing with Fan Jianxian a while ago. However, he was currently unleashing 100% of it. Chapter 2480, Defeated. Surging divine powers were charging the Blood Mountain sword and causing it to begin trembling violently and became extremely blood-red. Jian Wushuang stared intensely at the green sword shadow wall coming toward him while he was raising the Blood Mountain sword. A terrifying hatred was gathering in his sword. "I just created this strike not long ago and hasn't shown it to anyone. You'll be its test subject today." Jian Wushuang's voice was cold as ice as the energies in Blood Mountain sword were charged to its limit. In the blink of an eye, the wide-spanning transmigration law power began to burst out. Transmigration sword technique, hateful path toward heaven. Boom. The Blood Mountain sword swung downwards. The swing had sliced the void into two halves. Hey. The sword light that was filled with an infinite hatred willfully swept across the void. Sword essences filled everywhere it passed by as if it had paved the entire way to heaven. Hateful path toward heaven was a move Jian Wushuang created while studying Fengtian scroll. It was also the third move in his transmigration sword technique after Endless Cycle and Samsara Empty Strike. It was also the debut of that move. A sword light that was filled with hatred stunned everyone as soon as it appeared. Under the watching eyes of countless experts around, the magnificent hatred-filled sword light clashed head-on with the wave-like green sword shadow that was pressing in. For a moment, it looked like two entire worlds had collided. What came with it was an earth-shattering boom. The infinite sword essences and divine powers expanded violently towards every direction. The heavens were screaming while the earth was shaking. A divine power wind storm suddenly swept up which reached far and wide. It shrouded the entire battlefield in a force that could destroy heaven and earth. "Retreat. Let's retreat quickly. Back off as far as we can, hurry." The experts' disciples from various sects who were standing around the battlefield retreated in fear. Many pairs of fearful eyes stared at the divine power wind storm on the battlefield and were gasping in awe. It was way too powerful. For those first-class and peak divine demons, an ultimate god's ability was way too strong, such that it was horrifying and suffocating. Fan Jiangxian's ability was to be expected, but I didn't expect Jian Wushuang could be this strong as well. Someone exclaimed. A while ago, all of them had the idea of killing Jian Wushuang. However, at that point, many sects have given up on that notion. Obviously, none of the Wuxia wilderness sects would take experts with an ultimate god's battle strength lightly. Even Narcissus Island, one of the top 10 sects, only had one known ultimate god was the Lord of Narcissus. In the other sects, many did not even have an ultimate god in residence. Therefore, however much they hated Jian Wushuang, they would not pick a fight with an expert possessing an ultimate god's battle strength. Ring ring ring, the heaven and earth finally calmed down. The overbearing divine power wind storm had also died down gradually, revealing what was supposed to be the battlefield. However, the previously flat battlefield grounds had disappeared and was replaced with what appeared to be huge craters left behind by the sweeping divine power. A figure stood on each end of the battlefield. Naturally, they were Jian Wushuang and Fan Jianxian. They stared at each other from either end of the battlefield with extremely cold expressions. Has a conclusion been determined yet? Who won and lost exactly? Those sects experts stood around the battlefield and stared at both of them. If it was in the past, they would assume Fan Jianxian was the winner without a doubt. He was a widely recognized true ultimate god and the top-ranking sword cultivator with an incredible reputation after all. Regardless of how strong Jian Wushuang could be, he was probably only in the divine demon realm in the end. However, as the battle carried on to that point, nobody could be certain about Fan Jianxian being the victor anymore. The battle strength that Jian Wushuang displayed was truly not below that of Fan Jianxian. Everyone stared at both of them as the battlefield quieted down. Right at that moment, there were some slight changes to Jian Wushuang's expression. The corner of his lips curved slightly upwards as he wore a mysterious smile. The number one sword cultivator of Wuxia wilderness is only so-so. Right when his voice faded, a big gulp of blood shot out of Fan Jianxian's mouth and spilled all over the ground. Fan Jianxian was pale to begin, but his face had turned deadly white now. The breath of his divine power had also sharply decreased. The sight of that shuddered everyone on the scene. He lost. Fan Jianxian has been defeated. The number one sword cultivator actually lost to Jian Wushuang, who was still merely a divine demon? Oh heavens! From today onwards, the title of Wuxia Wilderness number one sword cultivator would have to change its owner. The experts were wearing all kinds of expressions on their faces, with many of them feeling agitated. Fan Jianxian had become a legend very early on. However, someone had stepped violently on the legend that day. By stepping on the legend himself, he became the new number one sword cultivator. It was none other than Jian Wushuang. How's that possible? Long Zishan, Yu Aoqing, and many people from Narcissus Island were all shocked beyond words. They almost could not believe what they had just witnessed. Especially Narcissus Island's elder Lingyi and the seventh elder. They secretly felt regretful for agreeing with the Lord's decision to abandon Jian Wushuang now. However, it was too late. On the edge of the battlefield, although Fan Jianxian was badly injured, he was not dead yet. He stuffed 2 elixirs into his mouth, and as those elixirs went down, the paleness on his face slightly faded away. Afterward, he once again looked at Jian Wushuang with mixed feelings. Unexpectedly, you don't only have an incredibly deep understanding of space-time law. Your understanding of transmigration law was not bad either and had reached the first stage. In addition, that strike which you created by combining transmigration law and your own sword skill was truly powerful. Fan Jianxian was extraordinarily skillful with the sword, but even he had to admit the strike Jian Wushuang last shown was truly remarkable and strong. Judging purely from the power of that final strike, it was even slightly stronger than his own most powerful strike. I have nothing to say about losing to you. From now on, the number one sword cultivator of Wuxia Wilderness is you. Fan Jianxian seemed to have lost all his pride as an ultimate god expert before Jian Wushuang. The number one sword cultivator of Wuxia Wilderness, haha. I have no interest whatsoever in this title. By the way, aren't you sending messages for reinforcement? There's no need to hide, just take out the message token and do it. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly with an air of jest. Fan Jianxian's face changed right away. As it was exactly what he was doing, secretly sending messages for other supreme elders to come. As for what he said, that was just to distract Jian Wushuang. Unexpectedly, Jian Wushuang had read his mind. What surprised Fan Jianxian was, Jian Wushuang remained calm as usual without any thoughts of escaping even after knowing he was summoning reinforcement. Where did his self-confidence come from? Chapter 2481. The Three Supreme Elders hum. 2 figures slowly stepped out of the spatial passage when it appeared. One of them was a 2 meters tall, brawny elder with long purple hair. His towering figure stood there like a mountain. The brawny elder had black thunderbolts flashing around his body, which made him look exceptionally sturdy and formidable. The other person was a slender young woman completely shrouded in a black robe. The pretty young woman stood there without making a sound, as if she had turned into darkness. The people on the glade turned tumultuous when they saw those two arrived. Ultimate gods. Two ultimate gods. These two are the other two supreme elders of the Great Compassion sect. The black-robed woman was in Jianghu. I heard she's a killer and the top assassin in the Wuxia wilderness. However, after she became a supreme elder a long time ago, she had stopped doing that. Otherwise, anyone could hardly survive after being targeted by her. The purple long-haired elder is the tyrannical Lei Chong, who was also a reputable ultimate god super expert in the Wuxia wilderness. Lei Chong and Jianghu and Fan Jianxian. All the three supreme elders of Great Compassion sect are here? A series of exclamations broke out from the crowd. The various sects' divine demons experts shuddered. Ultimate gods were highly exalted in Wuxia wilderness. It was usually extremely difficult to even see an ultimate god. No wonder everyone was in a stupor when they saw three ultimate gods appearing together. Those three ultimate gods were there for Jian Wushuang alone. You are here? That's quick. Jian Wushuang stood there watching the arrival of Jianghu and Lei Chong with a hint of excitement in his eyes. Along with Fan Jianxian, I hope these three will not let me down. Jian Wushuang's fighting spirit had explosively risen in his heart. The three supreme elders of the Great Compassion sect had soon gathered together. Brother Jianxian, are you injured? What's the matter? Lei Chong asked. The supreme elders had addressed each other as brothers and sisters. It's Jian Wushuang. Not only did he possess the power of an ultimate god, but his combat skills are also at the peak of the ultimate god realm. I was careless and got accidentally injured when I fought against him. It's him? Lei Chong glanced over at Jian Wushuang. He's only a divine demon, a second-class divine demon to be precise. Could he possibly have the combat prowess of an ultimate god? And Jianghu was surprised. Don't underestimate him. His strength and capabilities are not confined to his cultivation level. Besides, he has an extremely high understanding of laws. Not only can he appear in two hologram images using the space-time law, but he has also mastered the first stage of transmigration law. His sword skills are comparable to mine, Fan Jianxian explained solemnly. It's strange that he did not try to escape even after knowing I've sent a message to both of you. I believe he must have some strong backing which he hasn't revealed yet. Lei Chong's expression was cold. Strong backing? No matter who or what that is, he will have to die for hurting you and killing so many Great Compassion sect's genius disciples. Let's act together and kill him. Following Lei Chong's stern orders, the three supreme elders of the Great Compassion sect concurrently took action. A majestic sword intent rose as Fan Jianxian displayed his sword world once again. Although the sword world was only a shell, it had a repression effect on Jian Wushuang. While the sword world rolled out, Junior brother Fan, I'll help you, said Jianghu, who waved while being shrouded in a black robe. A stream of dark air current instantly welling up from her body before shot out in all directions at an astonishing speed. The dark air currents soon enveloped the entire battlefield and formed a huge dark domain before combining with the sword world and crashing down on Jian Wushuang. This move, Jian Wushuang's eyes flickered. He recognized the technique performed by Jianghu. When the few Great Compassion sect's genius disciples besieged him in Saint's tomb, Yu Aoqing, one of the 12 minor kings, had performed the exact same move. However, Yu Aoqing's move was obviously not at the same power level as Jianghu's. Jianghu was Yu Aoqing's master after all and had taught Yu Aoqing that technique. The combination of the sword world and the dark domain had greatly oppressed Jian Wushuang. The three supreme elders made their moves and attacked Jian Wushuang with Lei Chong leading the attack. It was 3 against 1. The various sects experts who acted as spectators had a strange expression on their faces. In their opinion, Jian Wushuang's strength was incredible nonetheless, but his age and cultivation level were still rather young. However, those 3 Great Compassion sect supreme elders had joined forces against Jian Wushuang despite having lived for such a long time. Such bullying behavior was rather embarrassing. Then again, the world was never fair in the first place. Only strength and power were acknowledged. The Great Compassion sect's background and strength were acknowledged, so no one present dared to say anything even if they thought those 3 supreme elders were bullying the younger generation. Thunder exterminate. Majestic black thunderbolts pervaded Lei Chong. Under the guidance of his finger, the black thunderbolts in the void formed 9 black dragons. Each of those 9 dragons contained terrifying world destruction powers. On the command of Lei Chong, those 9 dragons roared and attacked Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang remained calm and advanced forward as the 9 dragons headed for him. Swash, swash, swash. 9 horrifying sword lights appeared at the same time and each of them decapitated one of those 9 dragons' heads. Those 9 dragons could barely even put up a struggle before collapsing instantly. I must say that was rather powerful, but my moves aren't as simple as it seems either. Lei Chang's eyes were cold as he stared ahead. A large number of black thunderbolts rolled out and instantly formed a black hell after the 9 dragons' collapse, trapping Jian Wushuang within it. Following that, a large number of black thunderbolts blasted upon Jian Wushuang. Chapter 2482. Fighting against 3 ultimate gods. Each of those black thunderbolts bombarded Jian Wushuang's divine body. If it was an ordinary divine demon, those black thunderbolts would have instantly pulverized his body. However, Jian Wushuang's divine body was the most perfect divine body that only a perfect chaotic creature could possess. The black thunderbolts did no harm to his body. Humph! Letting out a cold and derisive snort, he discharged his majestic divine power and crushed those black thunderbolts into debris. Jian Wushuang was suddenly alarmed. He had similar feelings before in the saint's tomb when Yu Aoqing planned her attack during the siege. Whoosh! Jian Wushuang disappeared and an apparition took the place where his previously physical body was. Check. The void was torn apart as a sharp dagger directly passed through Jian Wushuang's apparition. A shrouded black-robed Jianghu unexpectedly appeared in the void. She was the one who stabbed the dagger. An apparition? Jianghu squinted her beautiful eyes. Indeed it's you. Your skills are much more sophisticated than Yu Aoqing, but it's a pity I won't fall for the same trick twice. Jian Wushuang's figure appeared in a void not far away with a grin on his face. Earlier at Saint's tomb, Jian Wushuang was not able to escape from Yu Aoqing's perfect sudden attack. If it were not because of his invincible divine body, he would have perished. Even though Jianghu had the perfect timing and technique, Jian Wushuang was no longer the same as before. His ability to perceive danger had improved by multiple folds, allowing him to detect Jianghu's assassination move far in advance. Don't be too happy. Jianghu glanced at Jian Wushuang coldly. In a flash, the dark air currents circulating around produced identical figures. 2 figures stood side by side, each holding a dagger and aimed violently at Jian Wushuang. This is the Dark Clone? Jian Wushuang was amazed. The Dark Clone was an ability acquired when the one reached a rather high level in understanding the law of darkness. Jianghu had obviously attained that ability with her high understanding of the law. Exterminate. Jian Wushuang raised his sword with a backhand motion. The sword technique impelled space-time and caused ripples to form in the surrounding void. That was his space-time sword technique. First form, cutting snow. 2 dark clones were immediately smashed by Jian Wushuang's sword. Jian Wushuang. A loud roar sounded abruptly and Fan Jianxian appeared next to Jian Wushuang. His face was stern as the green long sword in his hand turned into a steel whirlwind. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. A series of sword shadows were attacking Jian Wushuang from multiple tricky angles. Jian Wushuang had just defeated the 2 dark clones and was recovering from the suppression of both sword world and dark air currents. The sudden attack from Fan Jianxian had caught him off guard. However, he was able to regain his composure very quickly. Piss off, my defeated opponent. Jian Wushuang's long sword thrust forward with the strength of Samsara as he performed Transmigration Sword technique. Second form, Samsara Empty Strike. Interchanging between the palpable and imperceptible moments, it was hard to see which sword moves were real and which were just an illusion. Fan Jianxian contracted his iris to stay focused. He was wounded by Jian Wushuang before. Although he recovered a fair bit after swallowing the elixir pills, his combat power was nowhere at his peak. He dared not let down his guard and exhausted his strength to resist that attack when faced with Jian Wushuang's sword, causing his body to be expelled to some distance away. Right then, an extremely terrifying and violent aura came from above Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang raised his head, only to find Lei Chong had somehow appeared above him in the void. Lei Chong's body soared to a height of 5 meters with 2 large hammers in his hands. The 2 large hammers looked like 2 hills and impelled the unabating power of black thunderbolts when being waved around. Go to hell, brat. Lei Chong descended like the god of thunder while yelling. The 2 large hammers in his hand were swinging around frantically, ready to slam down hard on Jian Wushuang. Rumbling. The heaven and earth growled fiercely under those 2 large hammers. Jian Wushuang knew it was too late for him to dodge, so he could only raise the sword in his hand and discharge an astonishing gush of divine powers to parry off the attack. However, with a loud bang, the heavens seemed to crack open, releasing waves of violent black world-destroying thunderbolts. After the loud noise, a stream of light slammed into the ground below like a meteorite. That stream of light was surprisingly Jian Wushuang. He was smashed into the ground by Lei Chang's two large hammers, and the ground suddenly shook as a huge pothole appeared. Before Jian Wushuang could stand up from the pothole, a surging amount of black thunderbolts formed around Lei Chang's body. Black thunderbolts explode. Kaboom! Along with the collision of two large hammers, huge black thunderbolts as thick as buckets descended. The huge black thunderbolt was aimed directly towards the pothole where Jian Wushuang was located. Kaboom! The pothole and the entire surface of the ground were destroyed. The black thunderbolts covered the entire ground and destroyed everything. After a while, the black thunderbolts gradually dispersed. Somewhere above in the void, the trio, Lei Chong and Junju and Fan Jianxian, stood side by side as they looked down below. Is Jian Wushuang dead? Fan Jianxian murmured. Humph, if just based on attack power, I'm rather powerful and violent among many ultimate gods. This brat has been hit twice in succession. The last Black Thunderbolt's explosion move was extremely powerful. Even an ultimate god who suffered its frontal attack would be severely wounded if not killed. It would be hard for Jian Wushuang, who is just a divine demon, to resist that kind of impact, explained Lei Kuan scornfully. No, we can't pass judgment based on common sense for Jian Wushuang. His divine body is invincible. Senior brother Lei, your two moves might not be able to kill him, but perhaps it's not a far cry to seriously injure him, said Fan Jianxian. Let's see. And Junju seemed extremely cold. From around the battlefield, the various sects experts were also staring at the seemingly lifeless scorched earth that had been previously covered by those black thunderbolts. Jian Wushuang was in the hole. Everyone was curious if Jian Wushuang survived those brutal attacks. Suddenly, boom. Large rubbles were lifted up from the pit as a young figure stepped out of the debris and appeared in front of everyone. Your thunderbolts were good enough to scratch my itch. Jian Wushuang looked up at the trio in the void while grinning from ear to ear. Chapter 2483, Destroyed, He's Not Dead. Lei Chong had lightning in his eyes. Not only is he not dead, but the breath of his divine power also has not weakened. It seems he was unfazed, said Junju coldly. This brat? Fan Jiangxian's expression was extremely ugly. On the ground, Jian Wushuang raised his head to look at the three ultimate gods above and slowly receded his smile. Among the three ultimate god experts, Lei Chang's attack was brutal and is the strongest among the three. And Junju is good with the law of darkness and domain control. She is able to derive a clone of herself, and she also has perfect assassination skills. She is indeed someone extraordinary. Fan Jianxian appeared to be the weakest of them, murmured Jian Wushuang. These three ultimate gods have joined forces, and it's indeed difficult for me to contend with them single-handedly. If that is the case, Jian Wushuang's eyes were filled with a sharp glint. The stellar strength which had integrated into his divine Bodis blood and essence instantly surged and spread from within his body. 7 Stars Secret Technique, Activate. The 7 Stars Secret Technique was one of the 5 most powerful secret techniques of the 7 Stars Black Sect. It was much more advanced than the Stellar Star Secret Technique practiced by Jian Wushuang in his previous life. The Stellar Star Secret Technique he performed in his past life was heaven-defying. However, without the will of Heaven Wei's influence, he would require a long recovery period before performing it again. On the other hand, the 7 Star Secret Technique was different. Once the 7 Star Secret Technique was refined and fully integrated with divine powers, as long as the cultivator had sufficient divine power, one could perform and repeat the technique over and over again without the need to take a break, hence the reason it was considered one of the strongest secret technique of the 7 Stars Black Sect. Jian Wushuang began to execute the secret technique with nothing holding him back. With the power of stellar strength, Jian Wushuang's divine power breath spread out at a speed visible to the naked eye. Initially, he had just crossed into the second-class divine demon realm. However, he soon progressed to peak of the second-class divine demon realm in a short time. He was only a small step away from becoming a first-class divine demon. Having made that achievement, he relaxed his pace a little. The peak of the second-class divine demon. Unfortunately, the first volume of the 7 Star Secret Technique could merely help me improve by half a realm at most. If I can refine the second volume of the 7 Star Secret Technique, I would be able to cross into first-class divine demon. Well, it's good enough. Jian Wushuang balled up his fists to examine his powers and felt his divine powers improved quite a fair bit. At the same time, his majestic divine power burst out wildly from behind him, and in the blink of an eye, a huge golden god shadow was formed. The golden god shadow had then increased in volume and risen to 900 feet from Jian Wushuang's realm improvement. The 900 feet of Golden God Shadow was very close to the Divine God of Punishment second stage and could assist Jian Wushuang in his strength improvement. Using two major secret techniques simultaneously, Jian Wushuang's overall strength instantly rose to a whole new level. Now I can have a good fight with all of you. Jian Wushuang raised his head. His sharp eyes met the three ultimate gods above. Under his gaze, the three ultimate gods felt a tremendous pressure on them. This brat's divine power breath seems to have improved? Fan Jianxian commented. I felt it too. The golden god shadow of his seems to be powerful as well. And Jianghu looked solemn. No matter what trump card he has, we have three ultimate gods join forces. It should be enough to put up a fight. How can we be afraid of him? Lei Chong said coldly. Both Fan Jianxian and Jianghu nodded in agreement. At the very next moment, the sword world and dark domain once again oppressed Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang smiled indifferently. It's that domain again? Do you think I don't have one? Now I want to see whose domain is stronger. Jian Wushuang waved his large hands and several palm prints were sent directly towards the void ahead. The prison of punishment. Rumbling. The golden divine power suddenly erupted from the golden god shadow and gushed from all directions at a terrifying speed. The surrounding world was originally covered in the dark air current domain of Jianghu. However, under the crazy impact of the golden divine powers, the dark air currents were retreating. In just an instant, the dark air current domain was shattered by the impact and had completely collapsed. Did he just crush my domain? Even Jianghu was shocked to see what happened. After her domain collapsed, the golden divine power was still steady going forward, forming a huge golden divine power ocean that engulfed the entire battlefield in the blink of an eye. Thereafter, the golden divine power ocean transformed into a huge golden prison. This is the golden prison? Many various sects' genius disciples were shocked to see the scene. Most of them had seen the golden prison in Saint's tomb. None of the nearly 50 first-class divine demons who tried to kill Jian Wushuang had a chance to escape due to this infamous golden prison. They were either mercilessly slaughtered by Jian Wushuang, or they had to crush their safety token to escape from the tomb. The golden prison had reappeared once again. What was different from before was that the golden prison currently had three great compassionate sects' supreme elders within it. Three ultimate gods. They were trapped inside the golden prison. Lei Chong and Jianghu and Fan Jianxian looked solemn. They did not take it lightly just because their opponent was a divine demon. Suddenly, boom. Following the control of Jian Wushuang's mind, the golden divine power swept across and acted on the bodies of those three ultimate gods. They instantly felt a huge mountain weighing billions of pounds was on top of them. The oppression had greatly reduced the power they could exert. This domain is much stronger than what I've displayed. And Jianghu said coldly. Be careful. Lei Chong added. Jian Wushuang, who was under their close observation, made a move. Swoosh. His figure flickered and left two apparitions in the void. The infinite sword intent discharged by Jian Wushuang was like a hungry and ferocious beast as it lurched frantically towards its prey. Look what I've got, screamed Lei Chong. Black thunderbolts surged out of his body that had soared to a height of 5 meters and formed a black thunderbolt prison of 100 meters diameter from him. He stamped his soul hard and the void under his feet immediately cracked open as he held a large hammer in both palms and appeared in front of Jian Wushuang. Following that, his two large hammers were flung out. Chapter 2484, Destroyed 2. Star Thunderbolt Explode. Lei Chong's eyes flashed with dangerous murderous intent as his two large hammers destroyed the world. Transmigration Sword Technique, Hateful Path Toward Heaven. Jian Wushuang's Blood Mountain sword swung around fiercely. Boom. The void was directly cut into half. Eight. His sword light wantonly swept through the heaven with unrelenting hatred, and wherever the sword intent went past, it left a trail of ascent towards the way of heaven behind. That was the move that severely wounded Fan Jianxian earlier. The only difference was Jian Wushuang had superimposed that move with the 7-star secret technique and divine god of punishment, increasing its power by multiple folds. Two horrible blows of attacks collided. Head-on. Bang. The sword light hit the large hammer surface and made a ringing sound, causing waves of invisible ripples to spread. The black thunderbolts around Lei Chong instantly dimmed along with the surrounding black thunderbolt prison which started falling apart. His figure propelled like a cannonball, and finally slammed hard on the golden prison's wall behind him. His divine body trembled and caved in from the impact as he spat out blood. Senior brother Lei Chong was defeated? And Jianghu and Fan Jianxian were shocked. Without warning, Jian Wushuang appeared next to Jianghu. Jianghu was startled but not flustered. As her figure floated upward, dark air currents appeared in front of her and wrapped around Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang glanced at her coldly and he swept the Blood Mountain sword in his hand around 3 times. Wham! A huge sword net emerged and slashed the dark air currents into pieces. Jian Wushuang took a step and sent out 2 apparitions at the same time to approach Jianghu through the dark air currents. A vague sword light swept out. The sword light was captivating, like something that could only appear in a dreamland. The moment it appeared, space-time seemed to be completely frozen. Space-time sword technique, first form, cutting snow. No good. Jianghu sensed danger. She was the Queen of Darkness, a killer and expert in dealing with fatal blows at perfect timings. However, she was not good at fighting head-on. With Jian Wushuang being so close to her and his horrifying swordsmanship, she knew she could not escape. At the juncture of life and death, Jianghu tried her best to move aside. Fortunately, she managed to avoid the deadly sword. However, Jian Wushuang maneuvered the sword light across with just a casual flick of his sword and cut through Jianghu's shoulder with the unique samsara strength. Check. Jianghu's right arm flung out. Senior sister. Not far away, a shocked Fan Jianxian immediately turned into a stream of light and attacked Jian Wushuang. The green long sword in his hand discharged a shocking power that completely covered Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang glared at Fan Jianxian before waving his sword in anger and freed himself. He did not use any skills. It was just a plain chopping motion but done with great strength. Clang. The sword intent around Fan Jianxian faded while his figure was also severely smashed against the gold prison's wall. In the blink of an eye, 3 supreme elders and 3 ultimate gods of the Great Compassionate Sect were defeated. They hardly had any room to struggle before they were destroyed. My hand. Jianghu retreated a distance away. She was shrouded in the darkness again, stared at her right shoulder, and began using her divine power to regrow a new arm. However, she was surprised by the presence of a unique divine power around the wound. It was a unique power called Transformation of Transmigration Law, which made her unable to regrow her arms. Losing an arm had sharply decreased her combat powers. Jian Wushuang acted and was targeting Jianghu. Damn it. Jianghu wore an extremely ugly expression. Just when Jian Wushuang decided to keep hunting Jianghu, a black light appeared without the slightest sign next to him. Jian Wushuang's danger-perceiving abilities allowed him to instantly notice the black light. It was a baby's fist-sized black bead. Although the bead was not big in size, its destructive aura was strong and suffocating. Jian Wushuang's face sank and swerved to the side. Nevertheless, before he could do anything, the black bead exploded. Boom. A terrifying power broke out from within. The power was much stronger than a full-blown attack from Lei Chong. It could actually be as powerful as a blow from a high-level ultimate god. Jian Wushuang was naturally hit by its mighty power since he was so near to the black bead, causing his body to be completely plunged into the violent force. In the void not far away, Lei Chong rose to his feet again. He looked rather embarrassed with a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth, but his eyes were fixed on Jian Wushuang. I didn't expect Jian Wushuang to be so powerful. He crushed me in a head-on battle. He's much faster than junior sister Jianghu. His sword skills seem to be a bit more advanced than junior brother Fan Jianxian. The most important thing is the secret techniques he possesses are terrifying, especially that domain which he is putting on display at this moment. I can't properly utilize my strength under this domain's limitation. In summary, even if his overall combat power is not comparable to an ultimate god's, it was infinitely close. This black bead is a life-saving weapon which I paid a huge price to refine. Its power may be equivalent to an ultimate god's attack, but it's impossible to kill him with just one bead. Lei Chong's face turned cold and immediately yelled out, "Junior sister Jianghu, junior brother Fan Jianxian, come here now." The single-armed Jianghu and the severely wounded and pale Fan Jianxian rushed to Lei Chong's side without hesitation. Lei Chong then flipped his hand and took out an identical black bead, but this time he did not aim at the void where Jian Wushuang was. Instead, he aimed it toward the golden prison's wall. The black bead instantly exploded when it hit the wall. The terrifying power was concentrated at one tiny spot that even the stiff golden prison's wall could not resist. With a loud bang, a big hole was blasted on the golden prison's wall. Go! Lei Chong screamed as he escaped from the golden prison with Jianghu and Fan Jianxian. At the same time, Jian Wushuang, who was at the golden prison center, had also broken free from the thunderbolt bead's explosion and he chased after the trio. Chapter 2485. 100,000-fold payback. On the glade far and wide, a huge golden prison was suspended in mid-air. The various sects experts could only hear the horrifying peal of thunder from the prison but had no idea what was happening in it. With a loud bang, a huge hole blasted through one of the golden prison's corners and 3 piteous figures shot out from the hole at their fastest speed to the distant heaven. The golden prison completely disappeared after the trio escaped. The golden divine power had also dissipated and revealed a figure in the golden prison's center. Jian Wushuang looked magnificent and stunning with his sword in one hand and the 900 feet tall golden god shadow behind him. In the void at a distance, the 3 piteous ultimate gods had lost their tyrannical posture. Lei Chong, his face was quite pale with blood dripping from the corners of his mouth while the black thunderbolts around his body dimmed. Fan Jianxian, his breath was extremely weak while the sword intent surrounding him was decadent. The worst was in Junju. Although she was still shrouded in darkness, everyone noticed her missing arm. The 3 ultimate gods were extremely miserable. On the other hand, there were no signs of defeat or disadvantages on Jian Wushuang. In fact, the aura emanating from him was much stronger than before. Looking at the brutal contrast, the various sects experts instantly understood the battle's outcome. The 3 ultimate gods joined forces and lost? Everyone was shocked and speechless. Of course, a small number of them were starting to get somewhat used to this familiar scene. Starting from the opening of Saint's tomb up to where they were, Jian Wushuang had proven his strength through multiple battles, rising from an unknown figure to someone terrifying. There was a massacre in the tomb and almost no one thought he could survive being besieged by many genius disciples, but he survived. Facing the siege of nearly 50 first-class divine demon disciples, including several 12 minor kings, everyone thought he was dead meat. However, the nearly 50 genius disciples were defeated by him. He was peerless throughout his time in the tomb. After Jian Wushuang came out of the tomb, the various sects experts had joined forces to kill him. Everyone thought that Jian Wushuang was bound to die. In conclusion, he instantly killed Tu Chenqing before killing Han Yun and 3 other peak divine demons who fought against him in a formation. At that time, everyone was appalled by his capabilities. Thereafter, Supreme Elder Fan Jianxian of the Great Compassion sect challenged him to a duel. Again, everyone thought no matter how strong Jian Wushuang was, he would not be able to do much before an ultimate god, but Fan Jianxian was defeated by Jian Wushuang to everyone's astonishment. Up until his latest battle, 3 ultimate gods fought against Jian Wushuang, yet those ultimate gods were defeated. It was a miracle. Jian Wushuang had created multiple nearly impossible miracles within a few months' time since the opening of Saint's tomb. Genius, demon, or even monster were no longer appropriate words to describe Jian Wushuang. Many experts had then looked at Jian Wushuang like looking at a truly omnipotent god. And at that very moment, the omnipotent godlike young man in their eyes was advancing forward step by step with his sword pointed up at the heavens. As he slowly approached those 3 ultimate gods, there was a sneer on his face. You 3 ultimate gods sure escaped fast. The trio felt extremely ashamed upon hearing his claim. 3 ultimate gods joined forces against 1 divine demon and yet they were defeated altogether to the point they had to play their trump card to escape from the golden prison. That was truly embarrassing. Jian Wushuang stopped, but the jeering smile on his face was bigger than ever. You can run but you can't hide. If the 3 of you escape, what about the remaining Great Compassion sect's genius disciples? And how could your Great Compassion sect tame my anger? Lei Chong and the other 2 ultimate gods were startled when Jian Wushuang said so. On the glade, Great Compassion sect's genius disciples such as Long Zishan and Yu Aoqing were bitterly disappointed. They discovered Jian Wushuang was very close to them. If Jian Wushuang took his anger out on them, they could possibly be instantly killed by Jian Wushuang with no room to struggle as they were only disciples in the divine demon realm. Even Long Zishan and Yu Aoqing would never have any chance of surviving when facing Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang, what exactly do you want to do? Lei Chong shouted loudly. What am I going to do? You have to ask yourself this question. Jian Wushuang's voice became cold. From the moment I stepped into the tomb, I did nothing wrong and had not provoked anyone. Despite that, the genius disciples in the tomb came after me again and again. First, Pang Tao forced me to surrender the sword principle opportunities that I've earned. After that, Pang Tao wanted to put me to death in the fight for the position token. Out of no choice I had killed him. Subsequently, the Great Compassion sect's genius disciples went berserk and wanted to kill me madly. Even after I came out of the tomb, your Great Compassion sect was among the first to attack me. Tu Chenqing, the 4 great peak divine demons, and lastly you 3 supreme elders. Have I ever provoked any of you? Now, isn't it ridiculous for you to ask me what I wanted to do? Jian Wushuang's voice echoed throughout the glade and shook the heavens. The various sects experts wore a strange look on their faces when they heard that. They thought about it carefully and seemed that it was as Jian Wushuang had said, he did not provoke anyone. On the other hand, it was those greedy people who had actively sought trouble with Jian Wushuang. Apart from the Great Compassion sect's disciples, other various sects' disciples were also beheaded by Jian Wushuang. After Jian Wushuang came out of the tomb, it was Tu Chenqing and the others who picked a fight with Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang had been passive and merely fought for his life. In fact, Jian Wushuang suffered a big loss. In the distant void, those three ultimate gods were unsteady as they knew they were at fault. Lei Chang's voice eased. Jian Wushuang. This incident may have been started by the Great Compassion sect, but you have killed many of our disciples who are genius disciples. Jian Wushuang's eyes were cold. So what? I believe in the principle of doing good unto people who are good. If anyone offends me, I will pay back 100 or even 1,000 times worse. Chapter 2486. Explanation, didn't you ask what I want to do? Let me tell you now. Jian Wushuang's voice was cold as it echoed throughout the world. Listen, I want you to think carefully after you go back and give me an explanation which satisfies me and relieves me of anger. Otherwise, you'll have to pay the Great Compassion sect a visit in person to ask for it. You may have a strong background, so strong I may not be able to do anything against you. However, mark my words, as long as my anger persists, he'll stay at the Great Compassion sect's entrance and kill anyone who steps out of the sect until the last disciple and expert. How dare you? Lei Chong yelled furiously. Jian Wushuang smiled coldly. Try me. In addition, my patience is limited. I'll give you 1 month's time at most. Within a month, if the Great Compassion sect fails to give me a satisfactory explanation, I will do as I've said. Lei Chong's face was pale. Very well. Let's wait and see. Go, Lei Chong yelled. The Great Compassion sect's three ultimate gods as well as their disciples Long Zishan, Yu Aoqing and the others, did not linger around and soon left. Jian Wushuang watched the Great Compassion sect and the others leave without stopping them. After the Great Compassionate's people had left, Jian Wushuang turned around and was about to leave, but stopped abruptly after taking 2 steps. By the way, I remember when I walked out of the tomb, the Great Compassion sect was not the only sect who wanted to attack me. Jian Wushuang's razor-sharp eyes swept across the remaining sect's experts around. The complexion of those experts instantly turned pale. Even Great Compassion sect's 3 ultimate gods who stepped up could not do any harm to Jian Wushuang and were defeated. If Jian Wushuang were going to get even with the other sects, it would most probably end up. Humph, all of you who planned or had your disciples to do something to me in the tomb when I had a bounty. I remember all of them, so you better think about how to calm my anger. Otherwise, Jian Wushuang sneered and his laughter made those experts' scalps numb. Jian Wushuang ignored those sects and slowly walked in the direction where Narcissus Island's people were. In the void where Narcissus Island's disciples were located, Elder Lingyi and the 7th Elder were trembling. Elder Lingyi subconsciously came forward to greet him upon seeing Jian Wushuang's approach. Jian Wushuang, Elder Lingyi spoke only to find that Jian Wushuang was not interested in her. He merely walked past her and appeared in front of Elder Wujian. Brother Wujian, nothing happened to my parents, right? Jian Wushuang asked with a smile. His attitude towards Elder Wujian remained gentle, and because he was no longer a disciple of Narcissus Island, he did not address Wujian as an elder. Instead, he addressed Wujian as Brother Wujian, which was also quite cordial. Don't worry, my friend. Your parents are safe, said Wujian. Thank you, Brother Wujian. I'm going back to Anjiu Commandery now. You can let my parents go back too, said Jian Wushuang. All right. Wujian nodded slightly. If you ever come to Anjiu Commandery in the future, you can visit me. Jian Wushuang smiled. Definitely. Wujian was touched. After that, Jian Wushuang glanced at Zhong Yi, Su Tong, Wei Qing, Xiao Heng, and the other disciples behind Wujian. He nodded politely and turned around. Big sister, I'm going back to Blazing Moon City now. Do you want to go together? Jian Wushuang asked with a smile. At the ancient star temple, Zhuo Bing immediately stood up. Yes, I haven't been back to see our parents for a long time. Zhuo Bing rushed towards Jian Wushuang. The ancient star temple elders and Ling Dan did not hold her back anymore. Let's go. Jian Wushuang and Zhuo Bing set off to leave, heading to the Blazing Moon City in Anjiu Commandery. The various sects experts who were present exchanged looks and felt complicated. Especially the 2 Narcissus Island elders, Elder Lingyi and the 7th Elder. After Jian Wushuang walked out of the tomb, Jian Wushuang did not even glance at the two of them, let alone greet or speak to them. We shouldn't have made a decision so quickly. We should have waited longer for Jian Wushuang to come out of the tomb and observe his true strength before making a decision. Elder Ling's face was distorted in anguish. No, the Lord was not wrong in making a timely decision. Only then can Narcissus Island not be implicated, but what we didn't expect is that Jian Wushuang's strength has improved so much after his trip to the tomb. Even the three great compassion sect's supreme elders were defeated by him. The seventh elder clicked her lips. They felt sorry for Narcissus Island. What a terrible loss of a genius. A divine demon who could defeat three ultimate gods at the same time. His combat power might have easily surpassed the Lord of Narcissus Island. Jian Wushuang was still young with huge potential. His future was bright and limitless. How great if such a genius disciple belonged to Narcissus Island. Although Jian Wushuang was only an outer disciple and did not have much sense of belonging in Narcissus Island, if they did their best even if it were only symbolic to help him instead of chasing him out, perhaps Jian Wushuang would have felt very differently towards Narcissus Island. His sense of belonging might even have improved. Sadly, they had sent this superior demon away. Of course they were regretful. On the side, Elder Wu Jian sneered, "Ha, do you know how stupid the decision was? You are stupid and so is the Lord. You don't even know how incredible Jian Wushuang is, nor try to see his potential before making a decision. What's the point of regretting it now? It's useless. Jian Wushuang no longer belongs to Narcissus Island." Both Elder Lingyi and the seventh elder were even more ashamed after hearing Elder Wu Jian's words. They could not but feel helpless when they thought of what could have been a better outcome. After Jian Wushuang left, the experts and genius disciples of the various sects on the glade also left one after another. Many sects left in a hurry as Jian Wushuang had made it clear to them. Those sects who had taken action against Jian Wushuang were on pins and needles. They must return to their sects immediately and discuss with their leaders how to deal with this matter. The trip to Saint's tomb finally ended. Chapter 2487. Going home on the way back to Anjio Commandery. Little brother, did you really defeat those three supreme elders of the Great Compassion sect? Little brother, how on earth did you cultivate your skills? Father sent me a message a long time ago, saying your sword skill is unparalleled in the world. I didn't believe it much at that time, but now. Zhuo Bing was talking non-stop while walking alongside Jian Wushuang. She was obviously impressed by her little brother's strength. Jian Wushuang was rather patient with his relatives and hence briefly responded to her questions. By the way, little brother, if the Great Compassion sect hasn't given you an explanation after a month, will you really pay them a visit? Zhuo Bing looked over quizzically. Jian Wushuang smiled. Of course I will, since I have already said so. I will definitely not break my promise. However, the Great Compassionate sect is recognized as the top sect of Wuxia wilderness after all. Its background and strength should not be taken lightly. Zhuo Bing frowned. I know. I've absolute confidence to handle them since I've decided to do so. Big sister, don't worry. I'm not bragging. There may be some experts in Wuxia wilderness who can beat me, but there are almost none who can kill me, Jian Wushuang said with a smile. He was not bragging. His divine body was extremely powerful from being a perfect chaotic creature. He had the perfect immortal body, making it impossible to kill him even if an undying saint tried to. Generally, the ultimate gods were the strongest in Wuxia wilderness. Even when many ultimate gods combined their strength, they could pose no harm to him since they were unable to kill him. Jian Wushuang knew there was a mysterious expert in the Wuxia wilderness when he mentioned almost none. Daoist Shenshen. The Taoist who visited Blazing Moon City when he was born, calculated his birth chart, and bestowed him the name Jian Wushuang. If there was anyone capable of killing him in the Wuxia wilderness, Daoist Shenshen would be one of them. We're home. Jian Wushuang was pleased. After journeying for a few days, Zhuo Bing and Jian Wushuang finally arrived at Blazing Moon City. The two immediately went toward the governor's mansion. At the gate of the governor's mansion, whoosh, 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 4 figures flew out of the mansion and appeared in front of Jian Wushuang. Pleasure to meet Master Jian Wushuang. The 4 of them respectfully saluted Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang studied the 4 people in front of him. Those 4 people were second-class divine demons. They must be the ones sent by Elder Wu Jian to protect his parents. The 4 had already sent Zhui Yunfeng and his wife to a safe place but returned to Blazing Moon City due to Jian Wushuang's return. Although Elder Wu Jian is an elder of Narcissus Island, it's remarkable he can mobilize 4 second-class divine demons based on his personal abilities. Jian Wushuang nodded slightly and immediately waved his hand. 4 interspatial rings appeared in front of those 4 people. Thank you very much for your help. There are a lot of resources in these interspatial rings. Please take them as my gratitude. You may leave and return to Narcissus Island now that I'm here, said Jian Wushuang with a smile. The 4 second-class divine demons took those interspatial rings and took a quick glance inside it. They were overjoyed to discover its contents. Jian Wushuang had killed many genius disciples in the tomb, and among them were many first-class divine demons. He also killed the 5 peak divine demons such as Tu Chenqing outside the tomb. He was rich from making a fortune out of their belongings. The 4 second-class divine demons were extremely pleased to receive the gifts from Jian Wushuang. Master, well, now leave. The 4 second-class divine demons left soon after. Jian Wushuang and Zhuo Bing stepped into the governor's mansion. As soon as they were in the mansion, Jian Wushuang immediately spotted Zhuo Yunfeng and Luo Xinqin, who were welcoming them from the inner courtyard. Father, mother. Zhuo Bing ran over immediately. Binger. Zhuo Yunfeng and Luo Xinqin were very happy. Father, mother. I'm home, Jian Wushuang called out gently. I heard from those 4 masters that you've encountered some troubles and was forced to secretly evacuate us. Your mother and I have been worrying about you. Has the trouble been resolved now? Zhuo Yunfeng looked over. Almost, replied Jian Wushuang. Father, little brother is amazing. His strength is even more impressive. We don't have to worry about anything with him around. Zhuo Bing comforted. Oh. Zhuo Yunfeng looked curious. Don't listen to big sister. She is exaggerating. As long as I'm around, I'll never let my relatives suffer. Jian Wushuang promised. Zhuo Yunfeng and Luo Xinqin looked at each other and were quite relieved upon hearing that. Luo Xinqin had figured Jian Wushuang's real origins. She suspected Jian Wushuang might be a reincarnated person. However, whether Jian Wushuang was a reincarnated person or otherwise did not matter to them, as they were content with Jian Wushuang willingly considered them as his parents. Come, let's go in and talk. It so happens Penger sent me a message yesterday, saying he will be back in a few days. We will have a reunion soon, said Zhuo Yunfeng. Second brother is coming back? Jian Wushuang raised his brows and a smile appeared on his face. 3 days later, Zhuo Peng returned from the Ice Fire God Palace. The family had finally reunited and had a family dinner. At the family dinner, Zhuo Peng told his parents everything that had happened to Jian Wushuang in Saint's tomb. He even asked Jian Wushuang directly, Third brother, I heard from several seniors at Ice Fire God Palace that you killed a lot of various sects' genius disciples in the tomb, and those sects were angry. However, none of them could do anything to you. Even the ultimate gods who attempted to do so were defeated, right? Jian Wushuang was speechless. Ultimate gods? Zhuo Yunfeng was taken aback and immediately looked at Jian Wushuang. Husband, what are ultimate gods? Luo Xinqin asked. Ultimate gods are super experts in Wuxia wilderness. They are above the divine demon realm. I heard many top sects leaders in Wuxia wilderness, such as Lord of Great Compassion Sect and Lord of Narcissus Island, are ultimate gods, said Zhuo Yunfeng. What? Luo Xinqin was startled and immediately looked at Jian Wushuang. She was still in shock when she said, Schwanger, did you really defeated those ultimate gods? I merely engaged a few duels with them. It was not as exaggerated as what second brother said. Jian Wushuang touched his nose and smiled lightly. Even then Zhuo Yunfeng and Luo Xinqin were still shocked. My son. Zhuo Yunfeng was amazed but was able to understand after considering Luo Xinqin's speculations. Just when Jian Wushuang and his family were reunited, a sudden huge explosion was heard in Wuxia wilderness. The Lord of Great Compassion Sect, who spent years in retreat, came out. Chapter 2488. The Lord pays a visit. The Lord of Great Compassion Sect, the true leader of the Great Compassion Sect. The 3 supreme elders, Lei Chong and Junzhu and Fan Jianxian, also held extremely high status in the Great Compassion Sect. However, the true and sovereign leader of the Great Compassion Sect was ultimately the Lord. He was also recognized as the strongest expert in the Wuxia wilderness, a genuine high-level ultimate god. The Lord had spent many years in retreat, such that most daily management of the Great Compassion Sect was handed over to the 3 supreme elders. The Lord had finally returned from his retreat. It happened right after the 3 supreme elders of Great Compassion Sect were defeated head-on by Jian Wushuang. The true reason for the Lord's return was clear. On the second day of his return, he and the 3 ultimate gods left Great Compassion Sect and headed towards Anjiao Commandery. News traveled and caused an uproar in Wuxia wilderness. In Anjiao Commandery, hidden in an underground dark palace, several figures headed by Governor Baiyu stood waiting respectfully. Behind Baiyu were patriarchs of the 6 top families in Anzhou Commandery, some of which Jian Wushuang knew, such as Lin Taifeng, head of the Lin family, Zhuge Yuanchong, head of the Zhuge family, and Xiang Zong, head of Xiang family. Those people, including Baiyu, were all waiting for someone. They stood there patiently waiting, with none dared to complain of any dissatisfactions they may have. After a long period of time, a bright light lit up at the palace's center and a spatial wormhole slowly came into sight. They are here. Baiyu's expression became more alert and respectful than before. The light gradually dimmed and 4 figures stepped out of the spatial wormhole. Among those 4 people was a handsome middle-aged man who was dressed in a loose long robe, apart from Lei Chong and Junju and Fan Jianxian. This middle-aged man had stubbles on his chin and was giving off the impression of someone with a warm personality. Immortality Governor Baiyu. It's my pleasure to meet all of you. Baiyu and the 6 family heads behind him immediately bowed and saluted. Are you the governor? The handsome middle-aged man glanced at Baiyu. Baiyu shuddered under his gaze as if he was fully exposed. Lead me to Jian Wushuang, said the handsome middle-aged man casually. Yes, please follow me. Baiyu immediately led the way. The 6 top family heads were grim and proper. They knew the identities of those 4 people very well. Any one of those 4 people could easily wipe out the 6 top families and even the entire Anzhou Commandery with just a wave of their hand. Under the guidance of Baiyu, it took them some time before arriving at the Blazing Moon City where Jian Wushuang was. My lord, this is Blazing Moon City. Jian Wushuang's father is the city's governor. Jian Wushuang is currently staying in Blazing Moon City, Baiyu reported. The handsome middle-aged man nodded slightly, but his eyes were examining the surrounding void. Haha, quite a few people are here. The handsome-looking middle-aged man faintly laughed, but his voice could be heard throughout the void. Behind the handsome middle-aged man, those 3 ultimate gods including Lei Chong looked extremely cold. As an ultimate god, his perception abilities were extremely sensitive and he naturally felt the presence of those people hiding in the void. Most of those people were spies from various sections. Some of which were the sect's experts, and even a few sect lords were among them. Oh, that person's here too? The handsome middle-aged man was surprised. As far as his soul power could reach, he could see an elegant green-robed man standing in the void not far away. Behind the elegant green-robed man were Narcissus Island's elders such as Elder Lingyi and Elder Wujian. The elegant green-robed man was no other than the remarkable Ling Gong, Lord of Narcissus Island. Jian Wushuang was from Narcissus Island. What a pity! The handsome middle-aged man secretly shook his head. My lord, Jian Wushuang is in the governor's mansion. They'll bring him out now, said Baiyu. No need. The handsome middle-aged man waved his hand and turned serious. Yun Zhen from the Great Compassion sect is here to visit my friend, Jian Wushuang. A magnificent voice came from the handsome middle-aged man which echoed throughout the entire Blazing Moon City. Anyone who was at any corner of Blazing Moon City could clearly hear the voice. In the governor's mansion, Jian Wushuang's family had gathered together. Jian Wushuang was holding a cup of tea in his hands. When the handsome middle-aged man's voice echoed throughout Blazing Moon City, Jian Wushuang's eyes focused as he put down the teacup. Little brother Yun Zhen is, Zhuo Bing frowned and looked over. If I'm not mistaken, he should be Lord of Great Compassion sect. Jian Wushuang smiled slightly. Earlier, he received a message from Wujian about the Lord of Great Compassionate sect had come out from his retreat and was heading over to meet Jian Wushuang. The Lord of Great Compassion sect? Zhuo Bing, Zhuo Peng and Zhuo Yunfeng were taken aback. The Great Compassion sect was the recognized top sect in Wuxia wilderness. It was not hard to imagine the status Lord of Great Compassion sect had. Shuang'er. Luo Xinqin looked at Jian Wushuang worriedly. He's just a high-level ultimate god, it's no big deal. Father and mother, just wait here for a while. We'll be back. Big sister, second brother, please stay by father and mother's side, said Jian Wushuang. Sure. Zhuo Bing and Zhuo Peng both nodded their heads. They knew they were unable to help Jian Wushuang at all. After Jian Wushuang made the arrangements, he departed towards the void above Blazing Moon City. 2 apparitions flashed past, and Jian Wushuang soon appeared before the Great Compassion sect lord in the blink of an eye. Jian Wushuang studied the handsome middle-aged man. Is he the Lord of Great Compassion sect? Jian Wushuang stared at the handsome middle-aged man while his eyes rolled around in deep thoughts. In any case, he could see the other party was a high-level ultimate god, which is incomparable to ordinary ultimate gods like Lei Chong and Fan Jianxian. Are you Jian Wushuang? That handsome middle-aged man also stared at Jian Wushuang. His eyes were flashing with a strange luster as he attempted to read Jian Wushuang's expression but unfortunately failed. Jian Wushuang smiled indifferently. Yes, I am. Is Lord Yunjin here to give me an explanation? The Great Compassion Sect is the recognized top sect in Wuxia Wilderness. If you want us to give you an explanation, you must first prove your strength. It's useless even though you have previously defeated the 3 Supreme Elders, said Yunjin solemnly. I wonder how Lord Yunjin wants me to prove myself? Jian Wushuang smiled. It's very simple. Yunjin raised his hand and stretched out 3 fingers, just accept 3 of my palm strikes. Chapter 2489, 3 palm strikes. Withstand 3 palm strikes from you? Jian Wushuang smiled. He had speculated earlier a tyrannical sect like the Great Compassion Sect would not bow down to him easily. However, the Lord of Great Compassion Sect was more cunning when dealing with issues. He asked Jian Wushuang to withstand 3 palm strikes from him as a means to test Jian Wushuang's strength. If Jian Wushuang was not strong enough, he would die under the 3 palm strikes and the problem would be resolved. However, if those 3 palm strikes had neither killed nor injured Jian Wushuang, Yunjin planned on making an excuse to retreat so as to avoid getting humiliated. One could not help but to admit that, as the Lord of Great Compassion Sect who made the sect flourish for many years, Yunjin was good at dealing with matters. Very well, I'll take on your 3 palm strikes, said Jian Wushuang while nodding. Right here? Yunjin asked. Sure. Let's do it high up in the sky to avoid disturbing the city below, said Jian Wushuang. Yunjin nodded. Very well, here comes the first strike. Immediately after his voice faded, a majestic breath of divine powers began to gather within his palm. Everyone around was stunned at that divine power breath was a few times more powerful than a regular ultimate god's. As divine powers gathered to a certain point, Yunjin's right hand turned into a warm jade before striking forward at the void. The strike seemed so nonchalant but instantly stirred up a world of its own. Boom! A heaven-shaking energy began forming. A tall crystallized palm that covered half of Blazing Moon City formed out of thin air. The crystallized palm crushed the void and everything it came across before striking directly at Jian Wushuang. When the palm appeared, countless cultivators in Blazing Moon City raised their heads in shock and desperation. If that palm was to strike down on Blazing Moon City, the entire city would turn into ashes. Jian Wushuang was calmly watching that palm striking heading toward him. He shifted his body and swung out with the Blood Mountain sword in his hand. A blurry, almost dreamy sword shadow swept outward. The sword light swept toward the crystallized palm and sliced it apart right in the middle with a shattering noise. A complete trace of sword slash appeared and the palm was sliced into 2 halves. Large amounts of shattered crystallized divine power began to fan outwards, causing the void to suddenly become very colorful. However, both divine power and sword essence were confined in the skies, therefore not affecting Blazing Moon City at all. It's proven that you have good battle strength since you're able to shatter the charged palm strike containing 70% of my strength so easily, but watch out for the next one. They'll be using all of my powers. It's an ultimate secret technique that I created myself, said Yunjin. One, just come toward me. Jian Wushuang smiled with excitement shining in his eyes. Yunjin squinted as surges of divine power began to gather in his palm again, but this time it was more expanded and powerful than before. A thin layer of red light appeared on the surface of his body as his palm gradually became blood red. With the power charged to its maximum, the blood red palm was suddenly sent outwards. Giant devil ape! Yunjin yelled out sharply. Boom! The heavens and earth shook. The ever-expanding red light lashed out together with the palm and began to crystallize. It formed a huge object in the blink of an eye. It was a several hundred meters tall, fierce-looking giant devil ape. The devil ape had blood-red eyes while swinging its pair of thick, strong arms. Its upward roar caused ripples between heaven and earth before its body burst straight towards Jian Wushuang. There were terrifying energies pressing against Jian Wushuang. Perhaps even early-stage ultimate gods such as Lei Chong and Fan Jianxian would have failed to block such an attack. The Lord of Great Compassion Sect is truly a high-level ultimate god. His abilities are truly remarkable. Jian Wushuang was exclaiming in his mind as he watched the giant devil ape charging at him. However, in the next moment, the stellar strength within his body began to violently rise. Using the stellar strength within, Jian Wushuang's energy had surged a great deal, so did his strength, which had also increased immensely. He held tightly on Blood Mountain sword, which was making waves of neighing sounds before taking a leap. Jian Wushuang nonchalantly swung the sword sideways. Just a nonchalant swing without sword light or sword shadows bursting out. There were no ripples either. The void in front of him was calm as well. However, under the calmness, a gigantic sword light appeared out of nowhere. The sword light, as if connecting heaven and earth, was extremely bright and captivating. The moment it appeared, it became the core of heaven and earth, the focal point of it. It had even turned eternal. Throughout the oceans and wilderness, heaven and earth aligned. The sword light appeared before the giant devil ape following a string of whipping noises. The giant devil ape roared maniacally and lashed out violently with its two arms. Boom! A terrifying rumble suddenly filled the air. The entire void was trembling as shapeless airwaves swirled up and swept in from multiple directions. Finally, the giant devil ape was completely dissolved and the sword light which Jian Wushuang unleashed had disappeared as well. Jian Wushuang's body shook as he took a small step backward. As for Yunjin, he did not retreat even a bit since Jian Wushuang was slightly below his skill level. To be able to take my palm strike just now proves you're already above the 3 supreme elders of Great Compassion sect. However, what I'm going to unleash next is my most powerful creation and also my deadliest strike. It's called Crimson Elephants. Yunjin's voice was cold as his hands had not even stopped for a while as he issued his third palm strike right after Jian Wushuang took his second. Boom. Heaven and earth shook again as blood mist exploded into the air immediately after that. The entire void above Blazing Moon City had turned crimson as though it was inside an ocean of blood. Powerful energies were gathered at the center of the blood ocean. A total of 3 gigantic creatures were formed within a moment. This time it was not giant devil apes that were formed, but 3 larger crimson elephants. The crimson elephants were over 100 meters tall, incomparably huge, and were projecting deadly energy from their bodies. After they were formed, the 3 crimson elephants trumpeted loudly before charging fiercely toward Jian Wushuang. Judging from the crimson elephant's momentum, even a mountain would be shattered into pieces, let alone a mere person. Jian Wushuang's face turned stern, but the excitement in his eyes was burning even brighter. Behind him, a great deal of golden-colored divine power was swirling. 1,000 meters tall golden god shadow was formed. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.